America show. Were you among them? What did you see? What did you feel being there? What's next? And regardless of whether you made it or not, do you feel as though the protesters' message reached its intended audience? Call or text at 877-301-8970.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's Anand Giridharadas, political commentator and author of the Substack, The Ink, on the latest political news. We'll talk about the impact of Saturday's No Kings rallies, Trump's low-energy military parade, and horrifying political violence over the weekend in Minnesota. It's all ahead on BPR and GBH and NEPM.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump has arrived in the western Canadian province of Alberta for the G7 summit. It's being held near Calgary. As NPR's Danielle Kurtz-Laban reports, Trump has one-on-one meetings planned with multiple leaders, starting this hour with his Canadian host.
Trump's one-on-ones begin today with a morning meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. White House officials also confirmed that he will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. The White House has said Trump hopes to talk about topics including migration, drug smuggling, and trade at this week's summit. Trump has imposed tariffs on goods from all of his fellow G7 countries. Trump's America First worldview has put him at odds with foreign leaders at past G7s. In his first term, they clashed over climate change and trade. But his team also took issue with G7 agendas, thinking covering non-economic topics like culture and climate change constituted overreach. Danielle Kurtz-Laban, NPR News, Calgary.
There are growing calls for Israel and Iran to de-escalate their conflict. There's been a fourth night of missile and drone launches. In an interview with ABC News over the weekend, President Trump said, quote, "It's possible we could get involved, but we are not at this moment involved," end quote. NPR's Hadil El-Shalchi reports from Tel Aviv. The attacks are unprecedented for that Israeli region.
Israelis can sometimes be nonchalant about missile fire. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Yemeni Houthis fire rockets at Israel, but this isn't the same at all. And the Israeli air defense system, known as the Iron Dome, hasn't been able to intercept all of them, as we can see, which is leading to a level of destruction in central Israel, particularly, that hasn't been seen before, really.
NPR's Hadil El-Shalchi reporting. President Trump has ordered officials in his administration to expand their deportation campaigns in large, democratically led cities. As NPR's Adrian Florido reports, writing online, Trump said they should do all in their power to achieve his mass deportation goals.
ICE officers are herewith ordered, Trump wrote on Truth Social, to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. The president went on to accuse Democratic leaders in those and other cities of using immigrants without legal status to expand their voter base and to cheat in elections. There's never been evidence of this, but the president's post suggests that more than a week after ICE agents began aggressive raids in Los Angeles, setting off protests, other large cities could soon expect the same. Trump wrote, quote, "I have directed my entire administration to put every resource possible behind this effort." Adrian Florido, NPR News, Los Angeles.
The New York Times is reporting the Department of Homeland Security will reportedly pause efforts to deport certain migrants. That may include migrants in agriculture and the hotel and restaurant industries. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. Brookline police continue to look for suspects in a hate crime at a local Jewish deli after a brick was thrown through the window this weekend. The owner of the butchery on Harvard Ave, Gil Zilberberg, told police that the brick had Free Palestine written on it in large red letters.
Came and they tried to break the window, and they put a brick through the map of Israel, but as you can see, the window is still standing. So that means they will never break us. They will never break the Jewish people.
The exact number of suspects not confirmed at this time, but police say there are at least 2 that they're looking for. Small rally took place outside the butchery yesterday to show support for the deli and the local Jewish community. Anyone with information or video connected to the crime are encouraged to reach out to Brookline Police. The 4-day Bio International Convention kicks off today at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. Some 20,000 industry leaders from across the globe are expected to attend the convention, which is the largest, most comprehensive event for biotechnology in the world. Representatives from pharmaceutical companies, biotech startups, academia, nonprofits, and government agencies have the opportunity to mingle with researchers, business development professionals, and investors. Red Sox open a series with the Mariners in Seattle tonight. No Rafi Devers. He's been traded to the Giants. Mostly sunny this afternoon, high-low 70s, 66 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia, dedicated to improving the learning experience for America's students by sharing what works in pre-K through 12 education at edutopia.org.
He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio and NEPM up in the western part of the state. We're so glad people are joining us today. I want to tell you, Jim, we've got a couple of things coming up tomorrow at the BPL. Filmmaker Ken Burns is going to zoom in on the anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. And for our Boston audience, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu will join us for another edition of Ask the Mayor later in the show between 1 and 2. The governor, by the way, is going to be back Wednesday, June 25th at 11 o'clock in the morning. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
We
Hi,
are.
Jim.
Hey there. How are you?
Good.
But first, we want to hear from you. After a weekend in the streets for Pride, for No Kings protests, for the Army's 250th birthday, and for that Gemini in the White House who also celebrated our birthday this weekend, the crowd counts vary. But the ACLU estimates over 5 million people attended some of these 2,000 rallies throughout the country on Saturday. Were you among them? Our number is 877-301-8970. Whether you were there or not, how are you feeling this Monday? Reinvigorated by seeing your fellow community members out in the streets? Pessimistic about the real influence of Saturday's demonstrations? Was the military parade what did it for you? Even if you didn't make it out this weekend, we'd love to hear from you about what happens next. More protests? What? Did Trump win, or at least weather the protests this weekend? Again, the number to call or text is 877-301-8970. Numbers appear to be quite huge, actually, and they were everywhere.
Well, the numbers appear quite huge, and at least according to the reporting, it was not a packed crowd down for the military parade either, which made me feel a little bit better, because you heard a lot of veterans that were upset about this. You know,
they're arresting veterans too, protesters, by the way.
The sad thing is, I mean, you know, I don't think the military gets enough credit a lot for what they do, and you're volunteering to put your life on the line. The problem with all this feeling for the Army was that it was all Trump. You know, if it had been something separate or some memorial of the 250 years they've been in existence, or, you know, if the Marines did it or the Navy did, I mean, I've got no problem with that. It was the Trump part that I think ruined it.
Well, in light of the fact that it was the Trump part, and I think that's a fair analysis, what do you make of the fact that these No Kings protests were hugely well attended, at least those which I read or saw about, and the Trump thing, which was a Trump event, even though ostensibly for the 250th anniversary of the Army, was very poorly attended. You saw a video of lots of open seats along the way, that sort of thing.
It made me very happy, Jim.
Well, I'm sure it did. But I mean, is there a takeaway in that maybe there's an energy shift away from Trump, as these polls suggested last week, and towards people who are unhappy with his policies? I
think there is an energy shift, and I think it's going to get worse, because if they do get away with this bill that they're talking about, even though some of the impacts won't be felt for a while, I do think there's going to be some awareness of people's Medicaid being cut and SNAP being cut. I think there's going to be some awareness of people continuing to lose their jobs in research, and awareness at a lot of these colleges. I mean, you know, Trump himself is realizing he's ticking off a lot of his Republican lawmakers and people in the red states, because that's why he says we're not going to go after people in meat packing plants where a lot of immigrants work, because that's distressing to his
restaurants,
buddies.
Agriculture. Let me tell you something, for whatever it's worth. That's what Trump is saying, because obviously those are important constituencies for him. I'll see it when I believe it. I mean, Stephen Miller, who's engineering this thing, is a no-holds-barred kind of guy. As you know, they were doing 600 deportations a day. The mandate was to get up to 3,000, which, by the way, not coincidentally, would equal 1 million for the year, which I'm sure is a number he'd like. I am not convinced at all that there's an operational effect of this alleged hold of deportations from certain industries.
Well, you know what I think?
Let's see what happens.
I think Stephen Miller eventually is going to go the way of Elon Musk, because when people around Trump continue to do things that are very unpopular, Elon Musk is becoming increasingly unpopular. And I think that seeing pregnant women and mothers being separated from their children and 18-year-olds being hauled off, this is not generally what people were thinking of. I mean, they wanted the border shut down, and the border essentially is shut down. So why he just doesn't declare victory and move on to something else, which is usually his strategy, because this is not going to bear well, I don't think, in the long run. And Stephen Miller is very close to him now. He writes a lot of his speeches. But again, Trump, it's all about Trump. And I don't know. I don't know how long he's going to put up with Stephen Miller. Just look at the guy. He's such a weird-looking guy.
Okay, this is about you, Marjorie. It's not about Donald Trump and Stephen Miller.
It's about anybody
There are a lot of weird-looking people. Some of whom actually do good things,
he's a particularly he's a little
scary-looking,
nasty-looking guy.
Okay, 877-301-8097. I want to say one more thing before we get to the calls and the text. I was, on Friday, when we discussed this the weekend in advance, I was talking about what's really important is what's next. But I have to say, it's important, just the fact that Saturday happened and that so many people turned out in so many places around the country is really an important statement for those who believe that there should be resistance to a lot of what Trump is doing. So I hope people feel good about that day. I do hope they move on to other things, but I think that was an important thing. 877-301-8970 is our number. What are you laughing about?
We have 4 texts diametrically on opposite sides of the parade issue. This person says he disagrees with me. Actually, I'm on there. I've said the same thing they're saying. But this person says, I watched the parade. There weren't very many people there. Very few soldiers actually turned and saluted to Trump in the grandstand. I think it made him look like a loser. Then the next texter says, that military parade was awesome and very educational. The soldiers loved the commander-in-chief. Very inspiring. Huge crowd. Army enlistment highest in 3 years. And then the third one, I won't read them all.
Let me say one good thing about Trump, which you shouldn't have to say about a president. His speech.
Yeah, he didn't do.
I've never heard a speech from him from when he announced 8 or 9 years ago, where he didn't attack somebody in the most vicious of ways. He actually got through 8 or 10 minutes. It was a little fierce, the speech.
It was a little gruesome and bellicose.
Well, but nevertheless, it was about the Army. He didn't go off script. He
didn't start talking about trophy wives or windmills or any of his
other... Joe Biden's the worst president in the history of the world, or whatever.
No, I kept waiting for it. I watched the whole thing, but he didn't. And then this third person says, my husband's a soldier. He said the sloppiness of the marching by the troops in that bogus parade was extremely intentional.
Let's go to Simon and Hingham. You were first on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. What's going on with you?
So I just moved to Hingham, and I heard about the No Kings rally.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, cute little suburban town, a few dozen people, I'll go and be supported,
Cute little suburban town, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I'm pretty sure there were about 2,000 people there.
Wow.
I was totally blown away. I mean, they lined Route 3A for almost a mile. It opened my eyes.
Why'd you go, Simon? Why'd you participate?
Well, I can't think of anything to support about Donald Trump, and I wanted to be supportive so that other people don't feel like, we have to shut up and be afraid. It's not time to shut up and be afraid. It's time to open our mouths.
That's beautifully put.
Speak
Simon, thanks.
Democracy.
We really appreciate your call. Thanks for telling us about Saturday with you.
Our staff is just posting up a picture with a few thousand showed up in Anchorage, Alaska to protest. And then we have another texter who said they rallied in Worcester, massively lifted spirits and resolve. We have to keep going one day, not enough. Numbers will grow as attendees share positive, uplifting experiences.
Let's go to Dana in Swansea. Dana, welcome. Hi.
Oh, hi. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you very much. We appreciate both. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to my husband and I, we went to 3 different protests we're really close to Warren, Rhode Island, and also to Providence, but we stopped at India Point, where there was thousands of people. It was very peaceful, and the energy was fantastic, and it was really, really impressive. But my point in calling was I live in a red area, a red town, which is mind-blowing because nobody here really would benefit from any of Trump's policies. But
are you in Swansea? Is that where you live, Swansea?
In Swansea,
yeah.
Yes. And it blows my mind, like seeing my neighbors with Trump flags, Trump signs. But I've noticed that there's been a massive decrease. But the amount of people that came out and protested in Swansea it brought me to tears. I was like, wow, finally something is getting through to my neighbors. They're seeing things. They're actually active and standing up for each other, which has been really lost in our community. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure why, but it was really heartwarming, and it made me feel like we are not on the losing side any longer. It actually was reinvigorating, and I was very proud to take part in all three of them.
You should have spoken at the rally. That was a great little talk there, Dana. Thanks for the call.
That was my
call
first
us again.
job.
Appreciate it. What was?
Covering Swansea.
It was?
Swansea Selectmen, Swansea Conservation Commissions. Well, they did the poll hearings at the Selectmen's meetings, Jim.
Oh.
I would write down what number of the electric poll that was going to be relocated.
That's true, right?
I had no idea what I was doing. Okay, listen to this. I protested at the airport rotary in Hyannis, according to Cape Cod Women for Change. There were 2,500 to 3,000 people in attendance. So that's a pretty good turnout down there in the Cape, much of which is very red, too. Jack in Newport, Rhode Island. Hi, Jack.
Hello, Jack.
Good morning, guys.
Hi.
I participated on Aquidneck Island down here in Rhode Island, Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport. We had a strong contingent. I'd say, I'm not great with the estimated crowds, but I would say at least a couple hundred people, if not more. But as I was standing there, scanning the crowd, a thought came to me, and although this isn't universally necessarily the way it always works out, but it seemed to me there were a lot of seniors. I'm 80 years old, and there were a lot of young people, and I'm going to say people under 30. I thought that was pretty significant.
So cross section of ages. Yeah. Jack, thank you for the call from Newport, Rhode Island. It's a very pretty place. Now, this is beginning to become a theme here on the text messages. I have no idea if this is true, but several people, and this is another one, saying that they've seen on Instagram that soldiers were out of step as a way to protest the march Saturday, which is unusual because they're strictly trained to walk in step.
I don't know if that's
true. We get on that? See, if we could look into that.
Not today. Actually, maybe later this week.
Is that a conspiracy theory, or did that really happen?
I don't know. And by the way, if there are people who love...
If you can't march in step, that's a bad sign.
If there are people who love the military parade or thought the rallies, the protests, the No Kings were disappointing, we're anxious to hear from you, too. Don't hesitate to give us a buzz. 877-301-8970 is our number.
I was at a protest at the Framingham Common. Looked like at least 1,000 people. Hundreds of positive waves and honks from vehicles on Edge Hill Road as a main street passing the Common. There you go.
Lynn, you're...
Only one passing driver gave us the finger.
Well, that's good. It's probably down from a much larger number, let's say a few months ago. Lynn in Rentham, you're on the show. Hi.
Hi there. I wanted to tell you that I went to a couple in Boston the last few months, but I couldn't make it. So I thought I'll just go to a local one. So I went to one in Walpole, and it was so robust. I couldn't believe it.
Really?
It's the first time I think in my life that I've ever unironically waved a flag. And then I had to go somewhere, so I was driving through Natick Center, and it was the same thing. Just tons of people out there, everyone feeling supported. And as I was driving, I was talking to my mom, who is 78, and through me, she's been learning about all of this, and she's never been political. My whole family is not very political. So, but she went to one in Gloucester, and I could tell she was nervous. So I was on the phone with her, and while I was talking to her, I heard her say to someone that this was so great that she thought she was the only one afraid and alone, and it made me feel so good.
That is a beautiful story, Lynn. Thanks for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. Lynn from Rentham.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of our listeners went to these Went to these protests.
877-301-8970. You know anybody went to the military parade?
No, I don't. There are a lot of theories, too, which may be absolutely untrue about TikTok people signing up to go and then not showing up. These are theories that we have not fleshed out.
Well, that was in the old days. Remember when it wasn't in the first campaign where they would sign up for seats at Trump rallies and then not go in the hopes there'd be empty spaces?
Right.
I don't think that was an issue here because it wasn't like it was in a stadium. But, for example, the overflow areas had no people in them whatsoever.
Yeah, by the Washington Monument.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the stands that you saw pictures of.
Yeah, were fairly empty.
Yeah.
You have any other conspiratorial theories you want to totally untested? You want to share about them?
At least just because I get so many of them about the people marching out of step. You know, which is.
Did you see anybody marching out of step? Did you see that?
You know, I wasn't. I was cleaning the kitchen. You know,
how was that? Good.
It was good. I did a nice job cleaning the kitchen.
Fine.
But I wanted to hear Trump talk, and so when he came back to talk, I did listen to him. But I was not watching to see.
I wasn't going to say this, but since a couple of Texans said marching on a step, there was one group of Army people who were skipping. And and I thought that was out of total. I mean, we have no idea if these are true, by the way. This is no first-hand knowledge.
I said we have no idea, but we're getting deluged with them, so I thought I would mention it with the caveat that we do not know if they were just, they couldn't keep a beat or what their problem was.
I mean, it's pretty clear. I think you can objectively say that this was not a great triumph for Trump. This is supposed to be a great celebration. One of the sad things is because he's so divisive, there should be celebration of the 250th anniversary of the people who've served in the Army, but not diluted by the fact that the guy who really wanted the celebration for himself is so polarizing,
That's exactly what I said at the top of the show,
I just said it, I thought, a little more crisply. Crisply. And also, that was such a long time ago. Most people even forgot. I forgot. I, for one. Let's go to Kristen Gloucester. You're on BPR with Marjorie. You're going to meet Jim Browdy. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, Chris. Gloucester. It's a first time, long time.
Thank you a lot.
And I went to the protest in Gloucester, and unlike I think your caller from the Newport area, there was a paucity of 20-somethings. That I don't want that to be the essence of my call. Because the energy was really, really, really strong, but it was more senior citizen oriented than and middle age oriented than youngsters or comparative youngsters, and I was a little disappointed in that, but it was great energy, and it was great and I'm proud of all the people that were there, and I'm proud I did it, and that's all I wanted to say. So thank you for your time.
That's good.
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much. We have one from somebody that in Providence said there were 5,000 to 6,000 people down there. We had a great time chanting and singing "Mary from Rhode Island." The hands-off parade was was older people too, not older people, but I would say like 40 and up. And
where
as we've said, the hands-off parade that was a few weeks ago that was packed in Boston, huge, but it was very white and very old.
Can I say something? Because I'm so obsessed with the what's next thing, even though I'm trying to focus on Saturday. And by the way, a lot of other things happened this weekend, obviously, and we'll discuss them with Anand Giridharadas, including the murder of that House member and her husband in Minnesota, the detention of the United States Senator at that Homeland Security thing with Kristen. But if you go to the nokings.org website, I was curious to see and hopeful that there'd be something beyond June 14th. And if you click on what's next, again, this is national, even though the local components, they do have a bunch of things people can be doing on specific days. For example, under Disappeared in America, host or attend an action on June 26th to highlight the human cost of immigration raids or disappearances. And there are a bunch of other things. July 17th, which is the movement continues, honoring the legacy of John Lewis on July 17th. So at least check that out if that is your cup of tea. Look who's on the phone. Liliana from Fall River.
Oh,
Liliana.
my God, Liliana.
Wonderful to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
How are you?
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Yes, I went in Fall River.
Yeah.
We were, I would say, about 300 or more, right at the South Mall. And it was fantastic. The feeling that was there, everybody was singing. There was a young girl that played the trumpet. And she played every American song, Amazing Grace and America the Beautiful. and people were singing. There were a lot of young people, too.
That's great.
It was just beautiful.
Liliana, why were you there? What specifically drew you? We know you, but why, through the radio, but why were you there?
I am an immigrant. I am the immigrant that poison your blood. And I'm supposed to stay home and I'll say my piece. Are you kidding me? I am so upset with him. You have no idea.
Well, I think
want to tell you.
You're good.
I want to tell you something.
Please.
I just came back from Italy. And I went to Lago di Como specifically because I wanted to go and see where Mussolini got shot.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, I wanted to have that experience to say, damnation, that's where they are going to end up. That's where they end up.
Listen
Liliana,
to Liliana's laugh. That's pretty great.
I'm heartened because, as you know, the more voters in Fall River than ever supported Trump. It was the biggest vote for Republicans since Dwight Eisenhower, which upset me because I'm from Fall River, which has long been a very Democratic city. But I'm glad there was a decent turnout there.
I like your Mussolini story, too. Liliana, we love hearing from you. Call us again soon. We're really glad you were there at the rally. Liliana, one of our favorite callers. We met a couple of years ago after that woman slipped on a piece of prosciutto, I think it was, at Italy and sued for $50,000, and Liliana set her straight right here on the air.
That was great. That was great. 877-301-8970 is the number. We're going to keep talking about this for a few more minutes. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are also broadcasting at any PM up in the western part of the state, and we are here obviously at GBH in Brighton. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about whether you felt heartened by what went on yesterday, if you were part of the people, among the people that protested. Maybe you liked the military parade. If you did, let us know about that. And needless to say, there was this tragedy out in Minnesota where 2 lawmakers were shot dead in their home. One lawmaker and the spouse, and a second lawmaker and the spouse in the second home were severely injured by gunshots, but they were not killed. We'll be right back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
China is leading a new push to construct batteries that use salt.
One of the jokes I like to tell my students is the salt makes all of us high blood pressure, so eat less salt to put them in the battery.
And now those sodium-ion batteries are coming to market to power a new generation of electric scooters. That story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the International Institute of New England, celebrating 100 years of supporting Boston's immigrants through resettlement, education, employment support, and pathways to citizenship. IINE.org. And Mass General Brigham. Their leading heart and vascular specialists are committed to providing breakthrough care to patients with cutting-edge research and innovative treatments. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/heart.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. Jim Brody and Marge. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News. For some of our listeners at noon, we're going to be joined by an old friend of mine and Marjorie's, Lucy Wightman, who's written a spectacular new memoir. It's called Princess Cheyenne. That'd be her. My Life as Boston's Most Famous Stripper. Not only some incredible stories about her life and the time, people she met along the way. It is a really terrific
and descriptions
read.
Of the old combat zone, which was really a raunchy place, kind of scary to walk through in the daytime, never mind at nighttime.
So in any case, if you're just tuning in, we're talking with you about this weekend's protest. If you want to talk about the military parade in D.C. too, we're happy to talk to you about that as well. The number is 877-301-8970.
Elias in Boston says he's thinks the media is not reporting enough about the amount of people that attended protests or why they were happening. Senators being forcibly handcuffed for asking questions, secret police being given orders to step up their efforts in cities. He calls it a war on this country from the administration. I think we're doing a little bit better this time around. I mean, there's been a lot of reporting on the protests, the number of them. Maybe not enough, Elias. Maybe you're right. But
historically, as we discussed last week, the media is not really good at covering protests, rallies, that sort of thing. I thought they did a pretty good job. I thought there was adequate coverage of the detention of Senator Padilla from California at that Kristen meeting. We're going to talk to Anand Giridharadas about that in a minute.
One of the odd things, and this is going to still be true, I mean, maybe you can see more if you have drones flying over, but, in my life as a reporter, you ask the cops how many people showed up. I remember, sure. And you get widely different, versions of how many people showed up, depending on which cop you asked. So it was always a little inaccurate.
Well, there clearly were millions. I mean, there were close to 2,000 sites.
Was it 5 million? Wasn't that the
thing?
That's
what the ACLU says. I don't know if that's precise. Ross in a car, welcome to BPR. Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. I went to 2 No Kings protests this past weekend on Saturday, one in Bourne and the other in Falmouth. Both were extremely well attended. There was great energy. But I had an interesting experience in Bourne.
What happened?
I was standing at the bottom of the bridge, where cars come over to enter the Cape at the Rotary. And across from us was a couple of Trump protesters. One of them had a big Trump 2024 sign. The other one had a Trump mask on. But the guy with the big flag had a bullhorn. And he was screaming into it, "How much did George Soros pay you?" And to be honest with you, I think the guy was serious. And I kept thinking to myself, I can't remember the last time I encountered George Soros in Bourne, Mass. handing out money.
That's a big Trump theme. He says all the time that they're paid insurrectionists. That's what he says all the time.
Right. And it just goes to show you how deluded some of his followers are and how out of touch they are. With the folks who are out there protesting. The other thing I would just leave you with is, I was just trying to imagine myself with like a Barack Obama flag, or a Kamala Harris flag at a pro-MAGA demonstration. You'd end up in the hospital if you were even alive. And that's one of the differences between the left and the right. And that's true. So thanks. I really enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the story.
We did. Ross, thank you for sharing your experience with us. We appreciate it.
Speaking of Barack Obama, there's a lot of calls for where is Barack Obama?
Mark Leibovich wrote a piece this weekend from, and where, The Atlantic? Was that where it was?
Yeah, saying.
I mean, I tend to agree with his thesis there. This is a crisis. We talk about it every day, and the most respected Democrat in the country is Barack Obama.
We should ask Anand Giridharadas, because he was saying that there's been not enough reckoning and not enough blame.
That's a good
examination
point.
From the Democrats, and Barack Obama has been more critical of his party than a lot of members of the party that are still active as politicians.
Let's go to Brighton. Well, we're in Brighton. Let's talk to Deborah. Hello, Deborah. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I love your show, and I love you guys.
Oh,
You're
thank
very
you.
nice.
Thank you.
What's up?
You're welcome. I just want to comment. I'm by and large a Pollyanna, but there's no conspiracy theory here. I was watching, for example, just for one example, the Civil War unit, and they were so sloppy in their marching. I mean, really, I think, someone outside of the military like myself could clearly see that they were not feeling enthusiastic, and it just felt that way in their step. And there may have been others that were a little bit more, but I got that sense, and I don't think I don't think I'm making this up.
Well, as you heard,
Deborah, I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
So do I, Marjorie. So do I.
Because when you do see the usual marching pictures of whoever they are, people in the Army, people in the Marines, you kind of get in kind of trouble if you're not keeping time, right? In general, so you'd think that
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So I hope you are right.
There. It wasn't. It just wasn't there. I didn't feel it. Like there might have been some units that were better than others, but if you go back and look, for example, at the Civil War, group, especially. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, Deborah, apparently it made you happy. So regardless, it's good to hear from you and good to hear your spirits lifted. Thanks for the call. We
Listen to
appreciate
this. Here's Deb from West Roxbury, who was in Amsterdam on Saturday and attended a No Tyrants rally there, primarily attended by expats who are heartbroken by what's happening back in the USA.
Did you see the poll? I know we have short on time. Did you see the poll on CNN this morning of the people of the other G7 nations, because the meeting is happening today, about whether they think the President of the United States will act in the best interest of the collective group? And the numbers in the 70s and 80s, the answer is no. These are our allies. These are our
well,
friends.
Are they our allies? Do they consider themselves allies at this juncture?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, I think they're wondering if they are allies.
Yeah.
As we know, Trump has been fairly patient with Vladimir Putin.
You know what would be great, by the way, if some of you, we're out of time here, if some of you could text us or email us, bpr@wgbh.org or, 877-301-8970, what you intend to do next or what the organizations that led your local rallies or protests say is going to happen next. I'm really curious, and maybe in the next couple of days we'll have that discussion, but thanks for all of your calls and texts.
Wow, we have a teacher from Dudley who attended 3 protests in a row, Oxford, Charlton, and Dayville, Connecticut. Wow. Hundreds of people, and the cars were waving their banners at him when they drove past, or waving at him when they drove past. Anyway, we are coming back in just a second with Anand Giridharadas. We're going to talk to him about these rallies over this weekend. He's a journalist from the Ink. We're going to talk to him. You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Frederick Douglass, the opera. Ahead of its New England premiere, we have a behind-the-scenes look and listen with performer Kenneth Kellogg and conductor Gil Rose of Odyssey Opera and Boston Modern Orchestra Project. Plus, dust off your muskets. We'll also have a preview of the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. nebg.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. For our listeners in this part of the state, the mayor joins us tomorrow for an hour. Mayor Wu joins us for an hour from 1 to 2 at the Boston Public Library. Joined now on Zoom by Anand Giridharadas, political journalist, author of The Persuaders, Winners Take All. You can find his newsletter, The Ink, at the.ink. Watch him on MSNBC. And for all GBH listeners, Anand set up a deal where you can get a 30-day free trial of his fabulous newsletter. We're going to the.ink/BPR. Anand, good to see you. Welcome again.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So we have been talking with our listeners about what went on over the weekend, the horrible tragedy out in Minnesota, the protest march, the military march. You just posted a new piece about the parade, in the military parade in D.C., and called it a bad parade is a good sign. So tell us what you said.
Well, look, I mean, I think we all try to be good at the things we undertake. But what I wanted to suggest in this piece is that sometimes it is good to be bad at certain things. And I think lockstep military parades are an excellent thing to be terrible at. And one of the things we saw, look, we all know, and we have pictures in our mind, and this meme really started to develop this weekend. We all know the pictures of the parade Trump wanted, right? We have that seared into our mind. You've seen it in North Korea. You've seen it in China. You've seen it in Iran, right? We can all
Russia.
There's the kicking. There's the kicking, the legs go up and down. It's like synchronized swimming on a much greater scale. There's so many tanks. Like, you can just see that, right? I think we can all agree, and your previous caller made this point, this was not the parade we got. We are a rich, sophisticated country with a very advanced military, and it sort of looked a little bit like a high school JV marching squad the whole time. And this is not to cast aspersions on the strength and lethality of the American military, but this particular skill, marching like North Korean soldiers who will be executed if their shoulder is out of sync, is not our skill. And I wanted to say, this is a very good sign. And it's a good sign, although I jest a little bit. I actually take it very seriously. I think Donald Trump is up against something profound and essential to the American nature, which is spontaneity and variety and color and a kind of unruliness at the core of the American spirit that is the opposite of cohesion and discipline and lockstep. So I say in the piece, look, we're the country of hot steppers more than locksteppers. We're the country of Korean tacos in LA, where North Carolina meets Mexican flavors meets LA. We're not the country that he was trying to see from that viewing stand. And I think it's a measure of what he is up against. We often talk about what we're up against in him, but I think it's worth remembering what he's up against in us.
Okay.
Anand, when you used the three words a minute ago, spontaneity, variety, and color, would you use them to describe the other things that were happening on Saturday beyond the military parade?
Precisely. And it was a tale of two attempts, right? One attempt was the fantasy that Donald Trump had, that a North Korean-style military parade could fill the void left by his father's withheld love. The other striving over the weekend was that people from all across this country, not one leader, not one central force, but just disparately from the bottom up, people would come together for these No Kings protests and organize with a very simple message, that they refused to be subjects, that they didn't leave King George to get King Don. And people came together across this country. There were reports of much bigger crowds, even in very small towns. I was talking to this woman in Vermont, town of 6,000-7,000. They got 1,000 people coming out for these protests, way ahead of the 3.5% number that political scientists say you need to have people in the streets to start getting a critical mass. Giant protests in New York City, across the country. And so, yeah, you had an aspiration for a kind of lockstep parade to heal Trump's wounds. And then you had the bottom-up aspiration of the people to take power back into their hands and refuse authoritarianism. And to speak the only language Donald Trump understands, the No Kings crowd size was better.
No King's crowd size was better, and the pictures of some of the reviewing stands not being filled, and the Washington Monument surrounding grassy areas and walkways not being filled. But I wonder if you think, because we've had tons of callers before we talked to you, texting and saying that they thought a lot of these Army guys and gals were marching out of step on purpose. Do you think this was their own little protest? What do you think?
I mean, I certainly think it's plausible in the sense that, I think there's two things going on. That's possible because you got to remember, it's not like the military leans more Republican, but it's not uniformly so. And more importantly, I think people who tend to be in that kind of those segments of American life, even if they vote for the right, tend to be quite jealous of their personal liberties. It's how they explain what they do, what they fight for. So when people sign up to join the military, I don't think they generally think of themselves as enlisting to form kind of a birthday party rental company. The military is not, in fact, a birthday party rental company. We have birthday party rental companies.
I've used many of them, by the way.
Yeah, they'll supply tables. They'll supply chairs. They'll supply a cake if you want, costumes, strippers, whatever. But the U.S. military is actually not the same as a birthday party rental company. So probably they were not pleased to be used in that way. But I think more importantly, they're like, if you look at the images, and we have this at the Ink Post, some of these memes that developed of what Trump wanted versus what he got, the Chinese, and Korean, North Korean things versus here. I do think deep in your bones, you are either the society that marches like the North Koreans, or you are a society that could conceive of Korean Philly cheesesteak tacos. You are either the country that has that kind of Chinese, like 8,000 people. Do you understand how much rehearsal time it takes to get like 8,000 people in a square, right? The U.S. military is not spending its time marching in squares of 8,000. They're like doing actual drills.
Yeah. No.
Right? So the Russians do good parades, and then they fought in Ukraine, and it turns out they're like a really shitty army. Sorry, bad army.
No, we got the concept there. You conveyed it. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're talking to Anand Giridharadas from the Ink. And by the way, if you want a free 30-day trial subscription to the fabulous newsletter, you go to the.ink/BPR. On Friday, when we were talking to our listeners about what they were contemplating doing over the weekend, my obsession was not just Saturday, but what happens after Saturday. And my view is, looking back to some of the Nixonian moments, most presidents are pretty good at ducking their heads, even though this wasn't a head ducking for him, but a figurative head ducking if all they have to do it for is a day. Are you convinced there's a next step to this thing, or is it sort of reorganize and see where we go from here?
You're talking about the parade, or you're talking about the protest?
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the protest, the resistance, for lack of a better expression. Is there a next a step yet, or is it sort of organized as they go?
Well, I think it is organized as they go. It is very bottom-up. Organizations like Indivisible obviously are playing a very big role in it, but it is spontaneous and bottom-up. You were talking about Barack Obama a moment ago. I do think there is a real void of help at the top. I think these people don't need to be commanded, but I don't think it would hurt these efforts to be helped.
Do you read Mark Leibovich's?
I did read it.
Where is Barack Obama?
I have wondered the same thing. I mean, look, I think there is a moment there are moments in history when it is completely appropriate to focus one's time and energy as a former leader on Spotify deals and Netflix deals and things like that. You've earned your rest. It's not easy what anyone goes through in that job. But I think at some level, in moments like what we're talking about now, when it's really like endure or perish for liberal democracy, a concept I think that people like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and others would endorse, I think there is something untoward and strange about seeing these people like going to, theater premieres every now and then, or like going out on date night on social media, or the only kind of presence you see is just kind of them enjoying normal life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're having conversations. I'm sure there are phone calls behind the scenes or whatever. But I don't think anybody I know in these organizing spaces feels like they're getting any help from any of these people. And it does feel like, this phenomenon that fascism is going to be, to the extent that it is implanted in America, rich and privileged people will be able to buy themselves protection from it. Maybe not forever, but more. You can buy a bunker somewhere. You can buy a flight out. You can buy good lawyers. It does create this sense that people at the top, on the Democratic side, fundamentally feel like they're personally going to be okay. And they don't want to be out front. And all these old things of, well, he doesn't want to really be overexposed. He doesn't really want to, put his name. He doesn't want to make this about him. I think these are all old ways of thinking. You are either a leader in this moment, meeting the desire of the public for some kind of leadership, or you're not.
By the way, before we continue, a caller a couple of minutes ago said there were counter-protesters at whatever protest he went to, No King's thing, saying the protesters were paid by George Soros. An anonymous texter who was obviously there says one person at the Nashua No King's protest had a sign, quote, "I'm not a paid protester. I hate him for free." So that is the response to that allegation.
And you had a great piece, The Reckoning That Wasn't. Tell us what you were talking about there. You just alluded to some of it, but continue that theme of the Democrats really not being very introspective about where they went wrong and their terrible lack of popularity at the moment.
Oh, I think Anand is frozen.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, well, there you go.
Sorry, I'm back.
He's back.
I'm back.
Okay.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
The reckoning that wasn't.
The reckoning,
Yes.
yeah. Yep.
Yes. Which is, I mean, talking about the fact that the Democrats are not looking inward to see what they did wrong, and they're kind of being too defensive and not really facing their terrible unpopularity at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it is a common feature of the age. Obviously, Donald Trump is the least reflective, introspective person one can conjure. But what I tried to suggest, and I wrote it 6 months after the November election result, was that if you think back to last November, there was so much reckoning promised by Democrats, by the left more broadly, to say, okay, this should not be happening. We need to look at, look within and look in a deeper, more open way. Why are ideas that should be popular with lots of people not? What are we missing? What are we not seeing? There was a lot of promised reckoning, and then 6 months on, I tried to take stock of that, and I have been in a lot of those conversations and rooms as a kind of witness over the last 6 months, and I took stock of it and said, you know what, this was the reckoning that wasn't, and it's true across. It's true of Democratic Party leadership, and you see David Hogg, the DNC vice chair, was kicked out when he tried to shake things up at the party. Randy Weingarten is just teachers union leader has been kind of. I guess, took herself out of the DNC leadership, I think, this week, saying that they're not really willing to shake things up and change. But I think it's also, in the progressive movement space, there's been a lack of self-reflection about why some of these ideas are too academic and jargony and kind of just like not relatable to lots of Americans. I think there's been a real lack of reckoning around, why is it that a movement for authoritarianism and chauvinism has somehow allowed itself to claim the mantle of the normal in American life and claim the mantle of patriotism, even though it's the opposite? And why is it that movements on the left that claim to be for people and claim to be for a more inclusive future have turned so many people off? I think if you can't look within in these kinds of moments and follow answers where they lead, including painful places, you are not going to change. I've tried to have a lot of these interviews over the last 6 months. I've been in these rooms, and I was just really struck. I have been struck by the complete unwillingness to come to any tough conclusions. It's always the other guy bad. It's always the other side bad. There is no looking within. So we can't beat Trump by becoming like him.
How do you reconcile your concern, which is probably not a strong enough word, about the lack of a reckoning, the lack of curiosity about what went wrong, with what appears to be your very positive feeling about yesterday's protest? How do they fit together?
Well, they're two different things, right? One is the apparatus of leadership in this country, and one is people, right? I think people are rising up, stepping up, and doing what they can, often with very, very little, often with very little money at their disposal, very little time at their disposal. And you saw another expression of that this weekend with the protests. The reckoning I was talking about is not about ordinary people reckoning. It's about leaders of things, leaders of movements, leaders of parties, in a way, a kind of American political power elite. And the lack of self-reflection is really there. And it's those people, the average person deciding to go to a protest and that doesn't need to engage in some giant process of personal reckoning. But if you run a national organizing group, or if you run the Democratic Party, or if you run any other progressive nonprofit, you need to be engaged in really thinking about, why are our ideas so unpopular, right? I'm a writer. I take my book manuscripts, which in the writing of them are the best work I can do. And then I revise it, and it's the best revision I can do. And by the 10th time I'm revising it, I'm still treating it like it's a giant turd, right? The only way to be good at anything. I take my best work and I try to approach it with the attitude of, this is a crock of crap. how do you make it better, right? And I see these people in political leadership now who are just so self-confident that everything they've always been doing, every leader they've had in power, all their processes, all their slogans, all are perfect. It's Pangloss. What they have been doing is the perfect thing they should have always been doing. And the results, well, people are stupid. Fox News is bad. Murdoch's evil. Trump is evil. All, fair enough. But I don't think there's going to be a very bright future for the pro-democracy movement in this country without looking within. And I think, frankly, these protests, the connection, they're going to force, they're not just forming resistance to Trump. I think they're going to force reckoning on their own side.
Well, one of the theories, and you've heard it, so many people are talking about it. Ezra Klein just wrote this book about it, the New York Times guy. One of the big problems for Democrats is they keep promising and they never deliver. And by the way, the Democratic people were all telling the Democratic Party that Biden was too old, like ages ago, and no one listened. But we talk about parental leave and child care and the cost of.
I think Joe Biden delivered on quite a few things. He may have been a horrible messenger, but he did deliver on.
Well, that wasn't my point. My point was that people we didn't want him to run again, and the Democrats ran him anyway, even though the Democrats people kept telling him he's too old. But and I think that's legitimate. I mean, you cannot buy a house in Boston, and we're talking about all the time more housing, more housing, more housing. We never seem to build much, or deal with the cost of living in these democratically run cities, and I think it's a point.
When you're like on Canal Street in New York City, I'm sure you got the equivalent in Boston. You go to the area where people are selling like fake watches and fake handbags and things like that, right? So you picture you got these guys with like an overcoat, and then they like flash open the overcoat, and they got a bunch of watches inside the overcoat, and then they can close it up if the law comes by. I feel like the Democratic Party often operates like one of those vendors with this kind of overcoat full of their preferred policy positions. And they often are standing in front of a person who is telling them, sometimes yelling at them, about just like a pain point in their lives. I'm stressed. I'm anxious about this. I can't do that, right? And they're like the kind of rote vendor who just like keeps opening the trench coat and selling like whatever they happen to already have in there, instead of being like, what are you saying to me right now? What are you saying? Right? And so, when people were talking about prices, was there a dismissal about it, a condescension about it? Well, inflation's not going to matter if you're not in a free country or whatever. Because you are hawking the things you happen to have, the wares you have. You're trying to get rid of inventory instead of saying, what's happening right now? And so I think a lot of what is there is a shift afoot, I think, in some of these circles and thinking about what does it look like to have a Democratic Party that is focused on quality of life, focused on the kind of lived experience of the economy, rather than dedicated to a bunch of policy ideas that then have to be kind of explained and hooked into what people want.
Anand Giridharadas from The Ink, which is not a big turd, by the way. I want to say it is the opposite. We're thrilled to talk to you, as always. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for being with us.
We do, too.
You can find Anand's newsletter, The Ink, at the.ink. That's the.ink. And if you go to the ink/BPR, you can get a special 30-day free trial of the.ink. Thanks again to Anand. The show continues here in Boston. If you're listening at any PM, tune into the Fabulous 413 starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. They're going to review the weekend's Jacob's Pillow Festival honoring preservationist Norton Owens. Here in Boston, BPR continues on GBH 89.7 after the new news. Lucy Wightman here to talk about a new memoir, Princess Cheyenne, My Life as Boston's Most Famous Stripper, detailing life in the combat zone. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. Listen to BPR and GBH and NEPN, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Cambridge Homes, a nonprofit, independent, and assisted living residence with a tradition of service, working with Cambridge area seniors for more than 130 years. You can learn more at thecambridgehomes.org/tradition. The Tale of Dinosaurs is one of struggle, love, and survival. The ultimate ancient drama. Don't miss Walking with Dinosaurs, a stunning 6-part series starting tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2 of BPR. Lucy Wightman is out with a brand new memoir. It's called Princess Cheyenne, My Life as Boston's Most Famous Stripper. Lucy joins us in the studio to talk about how she got into the business, high and low lights from then, her almost marriage to Cat Stephen, and some big-name people she met along the way.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll talk with Lisa Thurau and Kristen Wheeler about the nonprofit Strategies for Youth, all about the impact bad interactions with police can have on young adults and the reforms that could shape a better future for the next generation. All that, plus 2 more things ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is attending the G7 summit, standing alongside the new Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. Trump took reporters' questions, including about the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. Trump says Iran's not winning and wants to talk.
They should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal.
On trade, Trump says he and Carney will negotiate. When asked if a deal is achievable within days or weeks, Trump said yes. The man arrested and charged in connection with the shootings of Minnesota state lawmakers and their spouses over the weekend is expected to make a court appearance today. Vance Belter is charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Drew Evans with Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension says the suspect's been cooperating.
Regardless of the level of cooperation of the individual, now that we have him in custody, it opens up additional investigative avenues that we'll be all working together collectively with to gather the information and evidence in this case.
Elected officials from both sides of the aisle have denounced violence against political officials. NPR has learned that President Trump has fired a member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. NPR's Jeff Brumfield reports the firing is a major move at the independent agency charged with overseeing nuclear safety.
Commissioner Christopher Hansen was appointed by President Biden and was set to serve on the commission until 2029. But in a brief email from the White House seen by NPR, Hansen was terminated on Friday. The NRC regulates all aspects of safety at America's nuclear reactors. It was set up in 1974 by Congress as an independent agency overseen by a mix of Republican and Democratic commissioners. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order that called for a wholesale revision of nuclear safety standards in coordination with the Department of Government Efficiency. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
The Agriculture Department estimates that about half of workers in that industry don't have legal status in the U.S. NPR's Jimena Bustia reports President Trump's efforts to increase deportations is leaving the industry feeling uneasy.
Last week, federal immigration officials carried out several arrests at a meatpacking plant in Nebraska and at farms in California. The move was seen by farm worker advocates as the biggest targeted sweep on the agriculture sector so far this year. For months, administration officials have sent mixed messages over how protected farm and food system workers are from the goal of deporting everyone without legal status. Trump has said that he wants to provide some solutions to farmers, but other cabinet officials are united on another message, that anyone without legal status has to leave. Still, labor advocates say even if arrests don't happen at the work sites, arrests in the communities where workers live could still disrupt the supply chain. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Today is the first full day of jury deliberations in Karen Reed's retrial. The jury got the case on Friday, deliberated for about 2 hours before being sent home for the weekend. There are the charges, the charges that she faces, the 12 jurors are considering, are second-degree murder, manslaughter OUI, and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. Reed is accused of hitting and killing her boyfriend John O'Keefe with her SUV in a snowstorm. Her first trial ended in a hung jury. And it's a historic week for Bunker Hill. Celebrations are being held today, marking the 200th anniversary of the laying of the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument. And then tomorrow, Tuesday, the 17th, marks the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Lee Eisman is a member of the Bunker Hill Monument Association. He says he's very excited.
I mean, it's really been a buzz now for a year that we've been working toward these events.
Some of the events include a procession including Freemasons, members of the historical and fraternal societies, and civic and military leaders from the Charlestown Navy Yard to the Bunker Hill Monument, and that's taking place today. Red Sox open a series with the Mariners in Seattle tonight. The NBA Championship Series continues tonight with the Pacers at OK City. They are split at 2 games apiece. The forecast, mostly sunny this afternoon, high-low 70s, partly cloudy, upper 50s overnight. Sun clouds, maybe some late-day showers tomorrow, high about 70, then maybe starting Thursday with some rain, then clearing at 80 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, we will be back at the Boston Public Library with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu joining us for another edition of Ask the Mayor. She'll be there from, I think she's there 1 to 2.
1 to 2, she is, yeah.
1 to 2. And the governor will be with us at the library Wednesday, June 25th at 11. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So right now we're joined by an old friend of both of ours, Lucy Wightman, whose new memoir, Totaled, and here it is right here. Can you see? Ooh, this way. Thank you.
Nice, Jim.
That way, there it is.
Very
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Princess Cheyenne, My Life is Boston's Most Famous Stripper. It is out tomorrow, which is one day ahead of her birthday. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
It's this fabulous story about her life, the combat zone, the people she met along the way. It is a true must-read. Lucy, congratulations. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you did a fantastic job, and your descriptions early on of the combat zone and what went on with the young strippers and some of these other places, not the Naked Eye, but some of these other places. It was great stuff. But just tell us a little bit. You know, when people started writing pieces about you, and there were so many, Boston Magazine, Evening Magazine, you were everywhere in Boston. You were like the WASP stripper. You were like the debutante stripper. So tell us about that little waspy upbringing of yours back in Illinois, then New Canaan.
Yes, Lake Forest, Illinois, and then New Canaan. So, you know, when you're born into a culture, you don't know it's a culture until you get out, right? So, I mean, I didn't know. I just knew that was, you know, my family, and it was very whitewashed and very homogenous. That's pretty much it. And there were expectations, but nobody told us what they were. Parents did not sit down and teach us things. We were just supposed to be, you know, just sort of by osmosis or something, learn how to be social and polite and lovely.
And you're an only child. And when you're an only child, like I am, when people say, oh, that explains everything. So you're a young kid, you're 15 or 16 years old, and you decide to self-tattoo. I don't even know if that's a verb. What is
it is now.
What is the...
is it hyphenated?
It is hyphenated. What is the tattoo that you put on yourself, and who was it a tribute to?
So the tattoo was SDG for Stephen Dimitri Giorgio.
Who would he be?
He would be Cat Stevens.
Cat Stevens. How old were you when you did the tattoo?
14. I was grounded for the summer.
And why were you so enamored of, I would argue, obsessed when you read the book with Cat Stevens?
Psychotically obsessed.
Why were you psychotically obsessed with Cat Stevens at 14?
I think it was a combination of his face, his voice.
Very cute.
Very cute.
Yes.
And my experience of music. So I have this weird thing called music synesthesia, which is a merging of senses, when things cross over. Some people smell numbers or colors, and it affects different parts of my body. So I think it was all those things combined, and I was bored most of the time, and that filled a lot
Frank
of
from
hours.
Sharon texts and says, Princess Cheyenne's dance to Tainted Love was beautiful and very memorable. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute.
But you had you mentioned, the parents weren't really involved in your upbringing, so you had a very unconventional childhood. And you had, if I may say, you're a mother, I'm a mother, you had a very cruel mother. She said terrible things to
she
you.
was very cold.
Yeah, so that was really, and I could see where you were in constant, sort of rebellion. Going from school to school to school. You're doing a lot of LSD at 14, which most of us waited till at least 20 to do a lot of LSD. So you had a very crazy upbringing.
I did, but I didn't know it was crazy, and I didn't know she was cold, and I didn't, it wasn't until much later that I found out that she never wanted to really have children. She didn't want to marry my father, all that stuff. And not that that forgives her. She could have bucked up a little bit more on the warmth department, but it's okay. We get on, right?
In the latter part of the book, every single time Lucy calls her, she hangs up on her. And that's essentially, that's what she hangs up the phone. Okay, I want to get back to Cat Stevens because I'm obsessed with the story about your obsession. So you're 14 and you do the self-tattoo deal.
Yes.
You're 16 and you decide to set off on a little journey. Where do you go?
So I decide, because I'd been saving myself for him, I wasn't going to make out with any boys or go to first or second or third base or any of that stuff. Absolutely not. So I decided to go to, first to New Haven to see him. And then I learned what his route was going to be in New York City. So I went to New York City and found him.
And how'd you find him exactly?
Well, because I sort of snuggled up next to this roadie named Mickey, who was on Quaaludes all the time, and he ended up being really quite harmless and a little bit charming. And so he told me that he would be going that Steve would be going to JP's after his show. So I didn't go to the show.
Steve, as in Cat Stevens,
yes.
Just so people know. And what was that first encounter like?
Psychotic in a good way. It was surreal. Because I was so young, to be able to process something like that was impossible.
And so you go to a concert, you have a bunch of roses.
Yeah.
And you learn from somebody you met, I think, that he always takes one rose and attaches it to the microphone.
After you stayed up all night long, by the way, to get these great seats at this concert. You were a determined young woman there. You were freezing to death outside. So you're practically in the front row.
Right. But remember, too, how did I get the roses? My mother.
Your mother.
My mother told me I had to bring roses, and she drove me to the concert. And so yes, this woman, Carol Hollander was her name. We became friends and stayed friends until she died. She said, you have to bring a rose up. So I'm like, well, what about the thorns? I didn't know anything. They take them off. So I walked up and handed it to him, and he knelt down and took it. And
of course, she's this gorgeous blonde in the front row with hair halfway down her back.
16 years old.
I'm sure he might have noticed that.
A baby. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's finish round one with Cat Stevens, or Steve, as we call him. As you say in your book, you lost your virginity with Cat Stevens.
Yes.
And I assume you kept seeing him day after day after day after that, correct?
No, Jim.
Exactly.
He didn't even know my name. I left the next morning. I was just,
And that was it for years, right?
That was it for a few years.
Okay, so then you then find this guy who is twice your age. You meet him, I think, at the Wander Inn, which is one of the great names of all time. Vermont, is that where that is?
Vermont.
Wander Inn. Okay, you travel around the country. Finally enough, you end up back in Boston. Correct me at any point. And you see an ad. You don't know what you're going to do. You see an ad for exotic dancers. What did you think an exotic dancer was?
I didn't know. I thought maybe somebody from a different country, like Africa or Asia somewhere.
But you like dancing.
But I love to dance. So I thought, well, I don't know what it involves, but can't hurt to go and see what it's about.
And
really.
How did that go?
It was interesting. I met a couple of characters before I arrived at the Ann Diamond Theatrical Agency.
By the way, some of the bit players in this book are the best players.
Oh, my God.
In the book. These
Total characters.
But guys, you go to Ann Diamond.
Yeah, and she was just, sitting behind her desk smoking a cigarette. And so, she I think she thought I probably was in the wrong place. But so I auditioned. I wasn't dressed. She had me, she said, well, this is naked dancing. I'm like, well, that's okay. It's naive. And I had on like jeans and a peasant shirt and Birkenstock sandals and no underwear.
It saves time, doesn't it?
Save time. Yeah. And she said, where's your outfit? I said, what do you mean? Like, I don't.
Why was it no problem? When you said a minute ago it's no problem, she said take your clothes off. Why was it no problem?
Well, because my father's side of the family, being naked was not a big deal. Like, we had this house up in the woods in Canada, and we would take soapies in the lake, and everybody was naked. And around, like, I don't know, 4th grade, I kind of caught on. I'm like, yeah, why do women have to, and girls have to wear shirts? Men don't. Like, it's hot. I don't want to wear a shirt. So I went shirtless while I was up there. And, it just, I don't know, it just never, I thought it was sort of silly to make a big deal about
Let me
being
tell
naked.
you, a lot of women, if they had bodies like yours, wouldn't have felt so bad being naked either. That's part of the thing, Lucy.
Yeah, but I was
gorgeous
young
then. You were young but gorgeous.
But I didn't think about my body or how I looked, or I didn't look in a mirror. I was just too young, to do that.
But you were naive. I mean, you were really
very
naive.
I still am.
Well, where'd you get your outfit? Tell us about where you bought your stripping outfit, your first one.
Bloomingdale's.
I love the lingerie. The Chestnut Hill Mall. The scene of where every crime begins, right? Chestnut Hill Mall.
Right.
Yeah. So how did you, what propelled you from naive, young, Brahmin or waspy kid just trying this out, and you had no problem with it, to becoming the superstar that you were? Marjorie said all around Boston. It wasn't just Boston. I mean, you were like national. You were in Playboy and all. So what caused that jump?
I think you guys did. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just went with the flow of the media. And so I when the first article came out about me, I learned more about myself, than I had known
Socialite
before.
stripper was the first
and I didn't
one,
even know what the social register was. And so I just sort of went with the flow, and it became more and more and more fun. And
yes.
You said, there's a quote here in the book. You say, I don't know who enjoyed the shows more, me or the audience. Why'd you enjoy it so much?
Because I was dancing to music I wanted to dance to, and I had discovered the art of the show and how to put a show together, whether it was thematic with a few little theatrical things maybe, and that was a blast.
And you also talk about how there was the dancing and the stripping. Then there was going to get to sitting with people and getting them to buy you drinks. And there was a dichotomy there that you talked a lot about. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, because to me, initially, that crossed the line into something I really didn't want to do. I didn't really want to talk to strange men. I just wanted to dance. And so when I first started, I was like everybody else. I didn't have any privileges or anything. And so I had to try.
Yeah.
But in the process, I met some really interesting men and continued to over time, while I was there, that it wasn't anything more than what it was slated as. It wasn't like any kind of prostitution or any kind of nasty stuff going on. It was just sitting with someone and having a fake drink.
And who were the men? Cross section?
Huge variety of men. I mean, just a huge variety of men. Really.
Yeah, I assume there were a lot of professional men married. I read about Robert Parker earlier in your career.
Bob, as he called himself.
The great mystery writer would stop by there sometime.
Yeah. And I don't know that I ever saw him again after. I mean, I didn't know who he was, of course. I didn't know really who anybody was. Allen Ginsberg used to stop by. And I mean, there were quite a few. Jerzy Kaczynski came in a few times.
Wow.
It was so, but
Well, there's another Alan you write about too, Alan Dershowitz.
Oh, who did I say?
Oh, you said Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you didn't mean the poet.
No, I
meant
meant Dersh. Yeah.
Dersh. And so what was the Dershowitz deal?
He would always ask really provocative, interesting questions. So I like talking to him. He would say,
Very smart guy.
So do you think you're a feminist? You do? How can you be a feminist doing this? That kind of thing. It was interesting.
And did he ask for you all the time?
No. He would just sit at the bar to keep to himself.
But you did talk about the power of it.
The power, yeah.
Yeah, talk about the power.
So, I mean, there were different kinds of power. The first kind of power I experienced was on stage. To have that many rapt eyes watching every move was kind of funny to me at first, really, because I could just make one itty-bitty move and it would affect everybody. I'd never experienced that before.
Yeah.
And if somebody was misbehaving, it was just a snap of the fingers and they would be politely asked to leave. And then the more I did it, the more, and the older I got, I realized, I thought, this is empowering as a female to do this because I'm choosing to do this completely. Nobody's choosing it for me. Nobody's telling me what to do. And I am hardly oppressed. And this was an Alan Dershowitz, topic. If I'm objectified, I'm not objectifying myself. That's up to other people. I'm just showing up and doing fun stuff.
Did your employer expect sex was not part of the deal?
No.
Right? I mean, you say
Yuck.
that no, but you go out of your way in the book to say it wasn't. Listen to her.
Right? We know.
How'd you get the name Cheyenne?
They gave it to me.
They gave it to you.
Yeah.
No, you were first Lucy for now.
I was Lucy for now.
Until they could figure out what it was.
Who's Lucy for now?
Yeah.
I didn't know about anything.
We're talking to Lucy Wightman. The book, which comes out tomorrow, but you can pre-order it everywhere, is Princess Cheyenne, My Life as Boston's Most Famous Stripper, and it is terrific.
We got a very someone who's read your book already. They said they have loved it, and you got it. We have a text from an MD that used to take care of you in Hanover, who says he sends greetings, or she sends greetings, says, hope you are well, anonymous on the South Shore. So tell us about the second round.
Before you do that, can we stay there for 1
Yes.
second? There are a lot of young people listening who probably never even heard the term combat zone.
Sure.
What was the combat zone like? What was the naked eye like? What was it like down there in downtown Crossing?
Well, the combat zone, for people that don't know, was a sort of demarcated adult entertainment district where it was legal to have peep shows and strip clubs, etc. And it was also a place where prostitutes gathered because there was good business there. Mm-hmm. I don't know a ton about the combat zone because I was in the naked eye bubble, and that's what the naked eye was. It was a bubble. It was very protective for me. And I know there are a lot of women, a lot of strippers that had terrible experiences, and I don't want my experience to say to anybody, oh, this is what everybody's experience was, because it wasn't.
Oh, I think your experience is quite unusual.
Yes, it is.
Because I did a lot of stories about the combat zone, and I remember there's that Good Time Charlie's that was down the street, and what you see there is strippers that would walk across the runway, and then they go down and they stick 50 cents in the jukebox, and no one was paying attention to them. It was really dreary and awful. And there were the peep shows, and there were the dirty bookstores, and it was scary to walk through there if you were a woman, even during the day. I think it was a tough.
It was. That's why I rode my bike to work.
Have you told the story in the air where your editor at the Herald told you to go to the bookstore and write down every title in the whole place?
That was a different dirty bookstore.
Okay.
That was in Stoughton.
Oh, was okay.
A little safer,
but
maybe.
I spent a lot of time at the Herald going to dirty bookstores. Part of my assignment.
That's why I always liked
so
you
Lucy
so much.
Wightman, as Marjorie, as we got into a minute ago, this 16-year-old kid decides, with her mother driving her, to go see Cat Stevens. We know what happened that particular time. You're pretty famous. You're very famous at this time, and you all of a sudden, well, you were. I mean, it is what you were, and you decide to take a break and go to London. Where'd the impulse come from?
Well, because I was still obsessed with Cat Stevens, who had, at this point, changed his name to Yusuf Islam. He had converted to Islam.
Even though you'd never talked to him or seen him since that night?
No. And when I saw him again, he didn't remember me, of course. And I was still obsessed, and I now had the money. So I thought, well, let me just go see what this is about and wrap this up. Basically, was my thought, because it stuck with me. That experience stuck with me. It was almost traumatizing, but in a good way. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I get it.
It was such a novel experience, and I couldn't share it with other people because nobody had a similar experience. So it was kind of odd in that way. And then therein lies the story of the rest of my life, right? But so the management office address was right on the back of the albums. So, 27 Curzon Street. So I went to London and got a room at the Ritz because I didn't know where else to stay.
And you were making good money as a stripper, too.
It was pretty good. Yeah. It was pretty good. But remember, we didn't take tips, so it was just what we got paid to dance. And, I called the office and said I, was in town to see Yusuf. And so the woman, Nikki, said, well, come by tomorrow. And I did. And he was not there. His brother, David, was there. And so I went back the next day. And that's when
Yeah, you don't have to give that all away.
Yeah.
I mean, and we can give the outlines. You should read it, but you essentially become engaged.
Yes.
And ready to marry. You convert.
Yes.
And then read the rest of the story. It is
Hold on. One of my favorite parts of the book is you're going with him to the mosque, and he's giving you all the instructions. You wash with the right hand for 30 seconds, the left hand for 30 seconds. The feet. Tell us about the instructions.
Well, it's very confusing.
Very confusing, yeah.
It's called wudu. It's, sort of cleaning yourself before you go to prayer.
WUDU.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And it's super involved. 3 times this, left, right, ears, feet, toes. You can't pass gas or poop afterwards, or you have to do it all over again.
Yeah. You're trying to keep this all straight.
Yes, it was
Well,
very
it's the same
confusing.
rule on the radio. I don't know if
Same
you're aware.
rules
We have
on
the
radio.
same. We have
That's
wudu
right.
thing
That's
too.
right, yeah.
I probably shouldn't say. I'll upset some people. And I don't want to. I'm trying to think what I don't want to give away. And after that, you did a ton of things. You had a sex advice thing, competing with Dr. Ruth on BCN.
Yes.
You did a Playboy thing.
Yes.
You became a bodybuilding champion or
That
some
was, that was
such.
kind of later, yeah.
Whatever. I mean,
yeah.
so you did a ton of things.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I even danced on the Harvard Lampoon table.
You did?
You did?
How'd that come out?
I guess fine. I barely remember it, but I think it was fun.
Yeah.
And you also you describe Cat Stevens or Yusuf or Steve or whoever the hell he is essentially as humorless. And you go from him to arguably one of the funniest people on the planet. And the thing I love most, and again, you should read this about her relationship with Andy Kaufman, which is pretty intense.
Yeah.
The thing I love most about this, talk about your strange meetings with Cat Stevens.
This was stranger.
You meet this guy and...
Way stranger.
Explain who the persona was. Who were you meeting?
He came into the Naked Eye. I didn't know any television personalities at night because I worked, and so he came in asking for princess. Because he didn't speak English. I say that with quotes, but I didn't know better. So he came in 5 nights in a row. And we basically played charades, and he was super annoying. I'll just say. So on the 5th night, a bunch of people got together, customers, dancers, surrounded the table and said, "You're Andy Kaufman," and he stood up. And his eyes were so big, and he was so nervous, and I felt I needed to protect him. And I said, "Stop, get away from him." And they walked away saying, "Oh, that's not Andy." So I agreed to meet him for lunch, one and only times I ever did that. When we went to the 7th Inn, which was a macrobiotic restaurant, and I walk in, he stands up, and he goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Excuse me?"
Because he was in character all the other times, right?
I didn't know that I didn't think he spoke any English.
It's his character from the show Taxi again for very.
It wasn't even. It was some other.
Was?
No, it wasn't Latka in the squeaky
But he
voice.
never left character until you met him at the restaurant.
No.
You know what I wonder? So it's 2025. Everybody's got, we're online. You can get all this, anything you want online. What is the business of being a dancer stripping today like? Is it even exist?
I don't honestly know.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, the last I knew, it was a lot of contact and lap dancing. All right, ready? Ugh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just,
Yeah.
But I don't know where it's at now.
I think a lot of places have shut down.
Probably.
There was a famous banana, what was it called?
The golden banana.
She has a golden banana connection, too.
Yes.
That shut down.
Did it? I don't know.
So.
Marjorie took me there. Remember that woman
there was a murder.
stoned to
There was
death?
a murder of a woman.
I was too scared to go to the bathroom by myself.
Yeah, I was too scared to go to the
do you
bathroom.
regret any of this?
No.
You really don't, do you?
None of it.
I knew that was the answer.
Yeah, no.
And before while you're here, I just want to, we met you years ago on another station, and one of the wonderful moments is we got to meet your kid, Tori, who's just this wonderful young explosion of energy, and in a horrible situation. She died in a car crash not long after we had met. But can you talk about her for 2 seconds? I know it's not in the book, but she was.
Yeah, she was. I mean, well, like our children, right? She was my baby girl, and gosh, I remember meeting a couple of different mothers who had lost children, and saying to myself, I can't even imagine But then I had to imagine, and it changed me completely. It changed every cell in my body.
Only child, Lucy Wightman, only child Tory.
We were talking about you in the context of you're talking to your daughter, who was then, I think, 16.
16, yeah.
about your career and what you've done, and how a mother explains that to her teenage daughter, which was not easy.
It was not easy. And she was ready, to sort of process that. And she was just, getting ready to launch herself,
When you say explain it to your kid, I remember in the book when you explain to your mother what you're doing, her line is something like, okay, from strippers to burkas. There's something wrong with you, Lucy. And
nobody wants to see you naked. Don't be ridiculous.
I know. I tell you, you triumphed over a mother that was not very helpful. Let's put it that way.
Why'd you write this book, Lucy?
Well, it's been, in my head for a long time. When I was in my mid-20s, Ike Williams, who's an intellectual property lawyer.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Yeah, he approached me and asked me to write a book. And, of course, I had no business writing a book because I was very self-absorbed, and I'm so glad it didn't get published. So he did sell the rights, though, to Warner Brothers, and I think they kept the rights for 5 years or something like that. So it was always in my mind. And I always wanted to do it, but I found it hard to have the discipline required until I got long COVID, and then all I was doing was sitting around.
I hope you're feeling better.
Oh, I feel much better now. But that really served me because I wasn't, I would just sit there.
By the way, for those who, obviously most of you, almost all of you haven't read, brilliant storytelling, some great local characters, some of whom you'll know, some of whom you won't know. And it's also really funny. I mean, you are really, in addition to everything else, you are really funny. It's fabulous. It moves really quickly. Both of us loved it, and we really urge people to buy it. Princess Cheyenne, My Life is Boston's Most Famous Stripper.
Yeah, we have a lot of text here from fans who know about you or saw you down at the Naked Eye many years ago. Thank you so much.
Well, before you go and read, Zoe, our coworker, sent us a note that I didn't see, quoting you from 10 minutes ago. I didn't want to talk to any strange men. I just wanted to dance. Zoe wrote a universal thought for most women, which I think is a great
good
line.
One, Zoe.
Lucy, we love seeing you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations. We've been speaking with Lucy Wightman, whose memoir, Princess Cheyenne, My Life is Boston's Most Famous Stripper, is out this week.
Tomorrow.
That's right, tomorrow, detailing life in Boston's combat zone, and a great story about your life, a great story about growing up. You, Cat Stevens, dancing in the combat zone, description of the zone. It's great. You really did a great job. Coming up after a quick break, law enforcement are arresting and detaining young people for misdemeanors at increased rates, according to a new report. We talk with two leaders of Cambridge-based Strategies for Youth about the importance of educating kids and law enforcement, the best way to engage with each other. Lisa Thurau and Kristen Wheeler, of Strategies for Youth are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Global instability has rejuvenated demand for tabletop war games, highly detailed simulations used to predict how conflict could unfold between world powers. The players take these games very seriously.
The whole point is to get people's heads into a situation, thinking about how they would actually act.
I'm Elsa Chang, a view inside the war game room on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Furniture Consignment Gallery, committed to the circular economy for over 30 years. Current inventory is available to view in their showrooms in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth. More at FurnitureConsignment.com.
And Polar Beverages, family made since 1882. Founded in Worcester, Massachusetts by Dennis Crowley. Offering a range of sparkling seltzers, mixers, and dry sodas. Product information and locations at polarbeverages.com.
Welcome back to BPR, Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu joins us tomorrow for an hour of Ask the Mayor. That is from 1 to 2. Ken Burns is going to zoom in tomorrow at 11:30 on Bunker Hill Day, and also his brilliant American Revolution documentary is coming out in November. Then Ask the Governor with, obviously, Governor Healy, Wednesday, June 25th. She'll be with us from 11 to noon at the library. We're joined now in Studio 3 by Lisa Thurau and Kristen Wheeler of Cambridge-based nonprofit Strategies for Youth. Lisa is executive director. Kristen is legal director and runs her youth program, Juvenile Justice Jeopardy. They join on the heels of a new report that shows Massachusetts is backsliding in some areas when it comes to juvenile justice reform. Welcome to you both. Really glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start with Executive Director Lisa. Tell us what this whole thing is about. What is it? What is the deal?
I will.
A little closer to the mic, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks again for inviting us
to
speak about this. Most Americans think that law enforcement agencies have policies that guide how law enforcement officers and the agency will respond to kids who are encountering officers in different situations that may lead to an arrest. And they also think that law enforcement officers have training to work with this age group, which I believe you're all parents know can be a challenging age group.
Yeah.
And the sad truth is many in Massachusetts and certainly across the country have neither training nor policies or law enforcement agency standards. So Strategies for Youth exists to close that gap, and we do this with 3 different strategies. The first strategy is to offer a Policing the Teen Brain training to promote effective interactions with youth and 12 model law enforcement policies for law enforcement interactions with youth. And both of those are developed and based on principles that interactions should be developmentally appropriate, trauma-informed, and equitable. And that's really what the science is saying, and that's what a lot of the research, almost all of the research demonstrates will lead to more public safety and less recidivism of kids. And then the third thing we do is something Kristen leads, and that is our Juvenile Justice Jeopardy games, and we hope you can come watch one. And these are opportunities for kids to get legally accurate information, which is not always available on TikTok, about how to navigate interactions with law enforcement, but also with their peers who'll say, no, you won't get into trouble when the laws work quite differently.
Well, we're going to do this later, but since I really am into this Juvenile Justice Jeopardy deal, we'll get to the bigger picture. What is that exactly, Kristen? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a youth educational program where we've gamified information to try to make it more...
Is gamify a word?
It is.
It is a word? Okay, fine. I got the concept. Go ahead.
So what we do is we try to empower young people with knowledge and information that is accurate and vetted about, as Lisa was saying, how to safely interact with law enforcement. What are your rights in those interactions, but also what are your obligations? And we think that if we provide young people in a safe environment where they're more relaxed, they're more engaged and open to learning because we're playing a game, if we provide them this information under that setup, we'll make them more likely to be reflective when they're in an interaction with law enforcement, which can often be fast-paced and high stakes. And what we want for everybody involved is for that interaction to go quickly, safely, smoothly.
So let's go to the other half of the interaction with the police. You guys train police, like who, for example? How does that happen? What kind of forces are we doing? You want to do that, Lisa?
Our organization Strategies for Youth started in 2010, but before that, we had used this approach to policing with the MBTA Transit Police, with Cambridge, Everett, and Nantucket. In Nantucket, we continued for many years. And we've trained regionally across Massachusetts and tried to influence how the Municipal Police Training Committee trains.
What do you train?
Officers.
What kind of things do you
So our
train them
training is based on understanding that the teen brain is quite different. It's in a period of tremendous, if not seismic change, not because the lobes are growing bigger, but because they're connecting and communicating. And during this phase, you're going to see all the behaviors that typically drive parents in particular, but adults generally, nuts. And that would be risk-taking, ignoring consequences, thinking if there is a consequence, it's going to be so cool and a good one. Not thinking through or connecting dots about the implications of behavior, testing boundaries, testing limits, testing the limits of gravity, testing the limits of the state laws, Massachusetts or California, whatever they may be. And so what we think is law enforcement has really come to view a lot of behavior among youth as intentional. And we're trying to pull back and show this age group isn't thinking that far ahead.
Is it? I'm thinking from recent times. I know this is not police officers as such, but it seems to me from afar that exactly the opposite of what you're training police to do is what ICE did in Milford, what ICE and maybe the police did in Worcester. You're nodding your head. Is that a fair characterization by me?
I think so. I think it's very frustrating to witness in the line of work that we're in, where we take great pains to work with local law enforcement to help them understand how to de-escalate with young people effectively. And what we see at a federal level with the response is the exact opposite approach, where we're actually seeing chaos kind of purposely strewn and escalations by federal officers.
And the Milford kid, we should say, is 18, and the daughter in Worcester, which we talked
16,
a lot about, a lot of 16.
16, but she is a perfect case of focusing on ICE's agenda by local law enforcement and not on the
community they're there to protect.
Right. Not the community they're there to protect, but on the very normative stress and trauma of a child watching her mother get pulled away and then charging her for doing what was a very explainable trauma-based response.
Well, part of what, from what I understand you're doing, too, is acknowledging that it's much better not to get into the system in the first place, that there's great harm to kids that wound up getting arrested. It'd be better to I don't know what citations are, but you can explain to me.
Well, diversion programs you talk about, right?
Absolutely, that too.
Yeah. So how does that work? Like, say you're doing something like you're shoplifting, or you scream at a cop, or you push a cop, or something in some kind of interaction. How does this all work?
Well, you've just laid out a couple of really important examples because of how quickly charges can escalate. So just in your example, shoplifting, for instance, is classified as a misdemeanor offense that carries less than 6 months possible punishment in the House of Corrections. So it's actually part of a definition of delinquency in the state of Massachusetts that would make a child not delinquent if they commit that on a first offense basis. However, you also mentioned pushing a cop, which would be, again, potentially very normative in a situation where a young person doesn't understand why a police officer is behaving a certain way towards them, and they might get reactive. But unfortunately, that's a felony level offense when you put hands on police officers. I think what the Policing the Teen brain training promotes with law enforcement is the use of summonsing when possible, meaning here's a piece of paper with your court date. Head there on your own, maybe in a month, maybe in a couple of weeks, as opposed to arrest, in which case those handcuffs are going in the back of the car, you're in maybe preliminary detention, possibly being transported to court in that way.
That's Kristen Wheeler. We're talking to Kristen and Lisa Thurau from Strategies for Youth. Lisa, when police operations agree to participate in the training, it's voluntary, obviously. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so here's what my concern is from afar, is the people who are most likely to volunteer to do this are the people who are probably most sensitive to the problem to begin with, and the people who probably need the training more than anybody else are the people who would probably resist the training. Is that...
That's fair in some places, although there are progressive chiefs who bring us in when they start leading a department and say, we need to change this. But I will tell you that is exactly why we're working so hard to institutionalize these trainings in statewide academies across the United States.
Why doesn't the legislature mandate that every police department has this kind of training? Why wouldn't they do that?
They kind of have. And in 2020, with the bill they passed, right, the first thing they did was create a set of requirements for the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, which is Massachusetts' independent oversight body, all the more necessary now that we don't have federal oversight. And they said, okay, give us some language or guidance, a philosophy about how law enforcement should work with youth. And we said it should be developmentally appropriate, trauma-informed, equitable. And those are the principles by which such interactions should be guided.
Excuse me, when you say trauma-informed, what do you mean?
Well, that they should recognize signs of trauma and respond to it instead of assuming it's a criminal act like they did in Worcester with the girl trying to rescue her mother. And they should not exacerbate it when a kid is having a trauma-informed reaction. And let's not forget, most kids are drawn into the orbit of law enforcement because of a trauma.
Right.
Either because they've suffered it
in the past,
recently, in the moment, or because of an initiation of something that's happened. And frankly, police are also very much exposed to trauma. And like we say during the training, when trauma meets trauma, you get drama. So you need to be aware, at least as the adult in the situation, how your own exposure may be affecting things. But what the Post also is doing now is it's creating standards for law enforcement agencies that must adhere to these standards to be certified. It's also going to require that the standards be translated into policies that will help law enforcement officers who are really asked a lot if they're expected to follow the law, which is changing and complicated and very fact-specific. So Massachusetts is really the leader of the pack in the United States.
Well, at the same time that you say that they're the leader of the pack, I'll take your word for it. I think we need to be leaders on more packs, frankly, from our legislature. There's this juvenile justice police and data report thing that came out, I think, in March, which was it was a state body that did this research. At least from our quick reading of some of the findings, we're moving in the wrong direction. Could you give us some of the high and low lights, Kristen, if you would?
Yeah, well, what this report has shown now for the second year in a row is we're seeing a plateauing of entries into the juvenile justice system. So we're not seeing an increase in offending patterns, but what we're seeing an increase in is the number of arrests of young people as opposed to summonses, which we discussed, those differing avenues towards the court system. And also within those increases of arrests, we're seeing an increase of those arrests for misdemeanor offenses, those lower level offenses, not to mention some racial disparities that continue to persist.
Huge racial disparities.
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, and I was curious to know, in addition to regular cops, we've talked a lot on the show about the disparities in discipline within schools based on the color of one's skin. Do you train school resource types as well?
Do.
As you do? Oh, great.
We do, and we call it policing the teen brain in school, and have offered that around the country. I wanted to explain why I said Massachusetts is leader of the pack, because it's in a narrow context here, because I agree with you, there are other things we could jump on, and that is the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission is the first in the country to have the power to certify a law enforcement agency and to create juvenile standards for law enforcement officers. So we're 37th to the table in the United States to have a post, but we'll be the first to do some things that I think will become national models, but for which we can be proud. And we've been working with the Post Commission to develop standards for law enforcement agencies and sharing with them our model law enforcement policies, which are being considered by other organizations too.
I'm sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Kristen, we have a story here about this bill up at the State House to prevent cops from using deceitful and deceptive practices during interrogations. So what are they doing?
Yeah, well, there's a bill that's been filed by Representative Sabadosa and Senator Sal DiDomenico that would prohibit law enforcement from using deception in juvenile interrogations. And what that means is during a custodial interrogation, just like maybe you've seen on TV, right, when you're in the room with the police officers and they're asking you questions, that in that context, law enforcement should not be allowed to lie or provide any misleading information or evidence to young people in those interrogations.
Like what? Your buddy's told on you already and you're facing 20 years if you don't...
Exactly right. In addition to, plopping down on the table a file full of papers that don't say anything in reality, but suggest there's all this evidence against you, and they push that across the desk.
And what is first of all, my understanding is roughly, 9 states have already done this, and of course we're, whatever. What is the argument at a legislative hearing against this? We have to be able to deceive a minor to be able to do our jobs? I mean...
It's a 5 weeks vacation, 5 months vacation.
Okay, what is the argument against this?
Well, I wouldn't pretend to know because we're so much in support of it. But I think what the concern is that when you have law enforcement that can use this tactic, and I'm not saying every law enforcement officer does it,
right.
that we see evidence now stacking up in terms of exonerations that have proven when young people are wrongfully convicted, 34% of those cases had a false confession involved in it. And false confessions can come from this situation where that developing brain Lisa mentioned, with all its progress it needs to make, but its lack of forward future thinking, is more invested in getting out of that situation they're in right now and thinking, I got to make this uncomfortable conversation end. So they're willing to say whatever to that authority figure who's pressuring
You know, the thing, I don't want to belabor this, but even if the legislature doesn't act on this thing, courts have acted in terms of penalties for juveniles, the most serious penalties, based upon brain development. So isn't this like a natural extension that you can't do deceitful interrogations? Yes?
That's exactly our point, right?
Okay.
This started back with Dianchenko saying that we could not sentence juveniles to life without parole here in Massachusetts. And it extended last year through Mattis, which says 18 to 21-year-olds, you can't do that either because it's still developing. So you're exactly right. The brain science tells us, let's step back and think about what we're doing to this age group and the harsh, drastic consequences that can result.
You know, for those of us who are listening and saying, you know, they did something bad, throw the book at them.
Yes.
Talk about, and most people get out of jail, and most people get out of jail after short sentences. So talk about the impact, and we only have like a minute or so left, about going to jail when you're 17. That would be juvenile jail, but still, what that does often.
Well, the impact of going into a facility, and let's start back further because our focus is on arrest, right, and what that can do, and we are focused on changing the front end of the system, not focusing solely on the back end. But it can be very traumatizing. It's humiliating. I don't think kids understand the systems at all, judging by what we hear when we play Jeopardy. And they think they're going to jail, and they've heard terrible things about it. So they walk in with a lot of fear. They've lost all what power they've had. And suddenly a consequence is rendered very awaring to them. And if they have any transgenerational trauma from anyone in their family like that, or if they don't speak English, if they don't process well, if they have a mental health or cognitive development issue, it is so overwhelming that many of them implode, and then there aren't services to support them. It doesn't lead to good outcomes is the key point.
Yeah.
How do people find out strategies for youth? If they want to find out more, get involved, how do they find you guys?
Well, we'd welcome them to look at our website, which is strategiesforyouth.org. And we always like to hear from people. So info@strategiesforyouth.org, and let us know if you want us to come play Jeopardy.
And you're a national, even though you're based in Cambridge, you do work around the country, right?
We work in 28 states now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, they're hoping to get to the Boston police, but it hasn't happened yet, as I understand it, right?
We'll actually bring it up with Mayor Wu and ask what the deal is.
That would be delightful. Thank you.
It's great to see you both. Thank you. Congratulations on your work.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have been listening to Lisa Thurau, Executive Director for Strategies for Youth, and Kristen Wheeler, the Legal Director for the same group, Strategies for Youth. And what is the website again?
Strategiesforyouth.org.
Strategiesforyouth.org. Thank you, Jim.
That's why I'm here.
Okay, coming up after this quick break, just enough time for our two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
Massachusetts is bracing for the effects of President Trump's travel ban.
GBH News.
Primary care doctors in the Mass General Brigham system claim that management is trying to stymie union efforts.
Here for what matters to you.
More than 100 people packed the hearing room at the State House, voicing support and opposition to doing away with non-medical exemptions for school vaccinations.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Learn more at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the Cambridge Homes, a nonprofit, independent, and assisted living community in Cambridge, offering residents supportive services, as well as cultural, educational, and social programs. thecambridgehomes.org/tradition.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And as we said, tomorrow from 1 to 2, the mayor will join us for an hour of Ask the Mayor. On the 25th of the month from 11 to noon, the governor will join us, Governor Healy, for Ask the Governor. It's time for two more things. What's your thing,
You're
Marjorie?
going first. You're going first.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
We've had this discussion twice. Okay, I will go first.
Okay.
Here's the deal. We've talked a lot about immigration raids, and I have to say, well, I'm not a huge fan of Gavin Newsom. He nailed it, I thought, the other day, talking about at least 2, if not 3, raids, and he describes them, as he said, in what he calls Donald Trump's America. Here's a little piece of what Governor Newsom had to say a day or two ago.
In Oxnard, California, and Ventura County yesterday, met with 3 people directly impacted by indiscriminate raids. I met a 12-year-old boy in 6th grade, weeping, crying, tears pouring down his face. His mother and father were both detained. They disappeared. He has no brothers, no sisters, no family. He quite literally is on his own, abandoned. That's Donald Trump's America. 20-plus years, his mom and dad working in the same fields, doing the same packing and shipping. 20-plus years. They've disappeared. 12-year-old boy. You saw the images of ICE officers running through strawberry fields, CBP helicopters above. I met a woman, a single mother, who was walking out at 5:45 a.m. to get in her car. 7 agents surrounded her. They took her in a car, in essence kidnapping her, driving her around for almost 2 hours until she finally convinced the agent, because she has 3 young children, a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 8-year-old, that they needed to get to school, and there's no one to help them get to school. She was finally allowed to call her oldest daughter, who was interrogated by the agent and threatened. And they threatened her after they dropped her off, said, we may be back, they said. Again, let me just say before you take over, I met a 12-year-old boy, 6th grade, weeping. Mother and father both detained. No brothers, no sisters, no family. He quite literally is on his own, abandoned. That's Governor Newsom from California. Marjorie?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons there were millions of people out protesting in the streets.
I think you're right.
I think they wanted to close the border. They didn't want to see a 12-year-old boy left without his parents. But I want to do a congratulations to Uma Abedin. You may remember she was tragically married to Anthony Weiner. And people may remember Anthony Weiner. If not, they remember his adopted persona, Carlos Danger. He was a very talented politician who was elected to Congress, but he had a problem because he kept sending around these pictures of himself with only his underwear on, and hinting at what he was interested in from those underwear pictures to many women, and some of them were younger women, and it didn't work out too well. He kept denying it. It was amazing. He denied it. She took him back. They did this whole documentary about him, remember?
We both saw it. We had the directors on.
It was called Wiener.
It was great.
Yeah, and she was standing by him.
He was running for mayor, and he was leading for a while.
He was a very talented politician.
Yeah.
He could really talk.
Really showed off.
And then he admitted it, and he said he was going to clean up his act, but alas, he kept going, and it got worse and worse and worse. I think the final straw for Uma Abedin was when he pictured himself in his underwear with things going on there next to their baby. So anyway, she finally had enough, and she got divorced. And she got married, and we're very happy about...
Who'd she marry?
Well, she married George Soros'
kid?
Son.
Oh.
Yes. So Uma Abedin will never have to worry again about her finances because, as we know, George Soros is very wealthy. But I'm just happy for her because, I mean, you wouldn't want to have your whole life dragged through the tabloids as his was and be the wife of the guy that was doing all these terrible things. So I'm very happy for her. She's now happily married, we hope. By the way, it was a big event for all the hobnob and the Democratic royalty. The Clintons were all there, of course.
She worked for Clinton.
She worked for Hillary Clinton, that's right.
Yeah.
And she had a great marriage up in I think they were in the Hamptons.
Is there a point to this, by the way?
Just that I'm glad...
Oh, that they're happy?
I'm glad that poor Uma, after putting up with this creepy guy for all this time, who is no longer going to be running for office, I don't think.
I don't think so, no.
And, I mean, would you want to be married to Carlos Danger, sending around pictures of himself in his underpants?
I don't think so. I mean, given the choice, the answer is probably, I can say with great certainty, no, I would not like to be married to Carlos Danger.
Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I have to say. And I think
we wish everybody, I'm sure our audience wishes the former Mrs. Carlos Danger.
The long-suffering
and
Uma
young
Abedin.
Mr. Soros.
We're very happy that she's married. We hope that Alex Soros, son of George Soros, is a nice guy. We know one thing.
You know what they did
for
to
sure,
celebrate their
Jim?
birthday? George Soros paid all the protesters, all 5 million of the protesters, to go to the protests because none of them wanted to go, and they just, because they're whatever.
Well, we know one thing.
What is it?
He's rich.
He is
okay.
rich.
Coming after the 1 o'clock news, the Reverends Irene, Monroe, and Emmett G. Price III are back for another edition of All Rev'd Up. We'll talk about the clergy's role in today's fraught political era and the Pope at the Chicago White Sox game. Not the Red Sox, but the White Sox. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price after the 1 o'clock news. Quick break, right back.
One individual can make a difference. A group of individuals can make a big difference. GBH is founded on listener support, and it's not about how much you give. It's about how many people get involved. Be the next to make a difference at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer, the Unclaimed Property Division, is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of BPR. It's another edition of All Rev'd Up with the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III. We'll talk about the intersection of pride and politics this Saturday as Boston's annual LGBTQ bash was joined by rally-goers from the widely attended No Kings events. Meanwhile, over in Chicago, Pope Leo just addressed the sold-out crowd at Chicago's Rate Field, home of his favorite team, the White Sox. We'll also get the Revs' take on the job this new Pope is doing.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then a beer garden in Norton is taking steps to rein in unruly toddlers running wild under not-so-strict supervision by their burnt-out parents. They're not the only ones. A handful of other beer gardens are implementing rules about when and where people can drink with their kids. We'll open phone and text lines, beer gardens, your kids, or summer outdoor restaurants in general, and you. It's all ahead on BPR and 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The man accused of assassinating a Minnesota state lawmaker along with her husband and wounding another lawmaker over the weekend is now facing federal charges. The FBI says Vance Belter has been moved to federal custody ahead of a court hearing this afternoon. U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson says he's seen nothing in materials uncovered in Belter's belongings involving a, quote, political screed or manifesto that would clearly identify motive for the deadly attacks.
Obviously, his primary motive was to go out and murder people. Now, they were all elected officials. They were all Democrats. Beyond that, I think it's just way too speculative for anyone that's reviewed these materials to know and to say what was motivating him in terms of ideology.
Belter is facing murder and attempted murder state charges in addition to the federal charges. President Trump has ordered officials in his administration to expand their deportation campaigns in largely Democratic-led cities. NPR's Adrian Florido reports Trump posted on social media that they should do all in their power to achieve his mass deportation goals.
ICE officers are herewith ordered, Trump wrote on Truth Social, to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. The president went on to accuse Democratic leaders in those and other cities of using immigrants without legal status to expand their voter base and to cheat in elections. There's never been evidence of this, but the president's post suggests that more than a week after ICE agents began aggressive raids in Los Angeles, setting off protests, other large cities could soon expect the same. Trump wrote, quote, "I have directed my entire administration to put every resource possible behind this effort." Adrian Florido, NPR News, Los Angeles.
The New York Times is reporting the Department of Homeland Security will pause efforts to deport certain migrants. That includes migrants in agriculture and the hotel and restaurant industries. The Israeli military says it has taken control of the skies in western Iran to the capital, Tehran. Israel and Iran are trading fire for a fourth day. The Iranian Ministry of Health says Israeli strikes have killed more than 200 people in Iran. Israeli officials say Iranian strikes have killed more than 20 in Israel. Here's NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi.
Israel's military said it now has, quote, aerial superiority over Iran's capital, Tehran. It said it has destroyed a third of the Iranian military's missile launchers, allowing Israeli forces to operate over Tehran without facing major threats. The Israeli military said that it had struck the command center of Iran's elite military Quds Force. The Quds Force is a subset of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which coordinates activities with Iranian allies. Iran has not responded to the Israeli military's claims. While President Trump said that the two sides needed to, quote, make a deal, he also told reporters that, quote, sometimes they have to fight it out. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. While President Trump attends the G7 meetings in Canada, top officials from 6 of Canada's provinces will meet with governors from New England and New York to talk about how they can maintain their relationships as Trump continues his fight over tariffs. The meeting, chaired by Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey at the State House, is part of an effort to keep open lines of communication and cooperation and identify ways to overcome the hardship of what they're calling uninvited tariffs. Local nonprofit harbor advocacy organization says South Boston's beaches are still the cleanest in the U.S. ahead of the summer season. Save the Harbor, Save the Bay Executive Director Chris Mancini says Pleasure Bay and City Point each maintained a 100% safety rating in the 2024 beach season water quality report card. Also says that water quality levels dropped at both Savin Hill Beach in Dorchester and Nahant Beach.
If the numbers stay low, that might reveal that there's some other issue that needs to be repaired, whether there's an outfall somewhere or a new inflow of contamination that needs to get patched up.
Mancini says they should have that information by the end of summer. Kings Beach and Lynn had the lowest water quality rating. Sports, Red Sox open a series on the road with the Mariners in Seattle this evening, 9:40 start. The NBA Championship Series continues tonight with the Pacers playing OK City. They're split at 2 games each. Mostly sunny this afternoon, high-low 70s. We are at 70 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, working to help protect small businesses and the owners that run them, offering customizable coverages to salons, accounting firms, tradespeople, and more. Learn more at progressivecommercial.com.
Welcome to hour number 3, actually, at Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Ken Burns zooms in tomorrow at 11:30. If you want to hear the great documentarian, he's going to be on at 11:30.
And 1 o'clock tomorrow. Who's 1 o'clock to 2?
The mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu.
Excellent. Ding, ding, ding. We're joined now by Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price there for All Rev'd Up. Reverend Monroe is a syndicated religion columnist and the Boston voice for Detour's African-American Heritage Trail. Reverend Price is the founding pastor of the Community of Love Christian Fellowship in Allston and the inaugural Dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music. Together, they host the All Rev'd Up podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. Hello to you two.
Hey, thanks for having us back.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining us today. So let's talk about these demonstrations over the weekend. There's a lot of talk that a lot of Christian leaders should be supporting these No Kings protests. There was this 12-mile clergy march around here over the weekend. But what do you think about this? What is the role of people like you guys in these current protests? Let's start with you, Emmett.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be active in living out what we espouse, what we say, what we share. We need to be very vocal and embody that, you know. And so I know Irene has been out in the streets and, you know, caring for people and sharing. I mean, I think our way of activism is really caring for people and sharing what we believe. But yeah, this No Kings thing, this was dealt with in the Old Testament, the New Testament, eons and eons ago in our faith tradition. The kings didn't work out in the Old Testament, and the kings didn't work out in the New Testament. So, I mean, this is resolved.
Was there? I mean, either of you. You know, when I look at Irene when Emmett's talking, one of my favorite games is trying to figure out what is she thinking at this particular moment, which I'm doing now. But we'll get to that in a second. Was there serious participation around the country by religious leaders? Irene, you're nodding your head. There was. You got to unmute yourself.
Oh, no, let me talk for Irene for one time. This is the first time ever.
Irene, you're muted. You have to unmute. You have to click a button there. We didn't hear anything.
Oh, can she hear us?
She's muted. Okay, so why don't you answer the question while I... Here she goes.
No, I can answer it.
Okay, go ahead.
But I just wanted to give you both all that there can be a moment of silence between me and Emmett.
Okay, fine. It's a beautiful thing.
And stuff. But no, you certainly did have clergy out there. There are a couple of things that we got to remember. I love some of the signs that says that the only minority that is killing democracy are the billionaires. And then I also love not only the No King signs, but I also love those signs that what makes America great is diversity. But what the job for clergy, and I need to say this because I'm very critical of us always trying to reinscribe that 1960 civil rights model of having clergy out front. That what clergy needs to do is this here, and it is not to take a backseat and certainly to be vocal, but it's not to lead. It's to help usher in a social gospel. And what I mean by that is to lift up not only compassion in this time, but the moral consciousness of what needs to be done in this particular moment. We need no prophets because we all have prophetic statements to say. But what made Saturday's march so wonderful, it was raining, but it didn't stop our parade, was that not only was it intergenerational, it was interspecies as well.
Oh,
dogs came
out. I love dogs. I love it.
You know, but Irene, can I get back to your thing about, as you know, I'm the agnostic in this foursome, and I have to say I like it when there are faith leaders in the lead, literally and figuratively. Why do you think they should be part of the pack, but not at the front of the pack?
Yeah, I mean, listen, what we can do and what we saw yesterday was an act of joyful defiance here. Oh. But what happens is that when we say we the people, and you know what was so wonderful, there were people that had signs that said we the people. So with that, we the people are people of faith and no faith. And I think what happens when we look at Black Lives Matter, they were very intentional that we do not want ministers of any faith to be leading the pact here. But I think that what we can do, and actually is we can be pastoral without having to lead the march. And I think that that's what people want, a pastoral kind of presence, but not leading a kind of particular religious faith in our...
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that, Emmett?
I do. I do. I think, you know, one of the most important things that we can do is be on the sidelines, praying for people, helping people to process what's going on. Sometimes people are fatigued and they're overwhelmed with overstimulation, and they need to have somebody to really talk through. And I think those are roles that we can play.
Yeah,
I think but what about this huge block of white evangelicals who seem to have lost Christian social teaching, decades ago? I mean, it seems to me what we need is more people of faith, or ministers, calling out those people as hypocrites, because there's like this silence when they come out with these edicts. You don't think so?
No, we don't need that, because what happens is then you got this tension between. I always say that the Christian right need to listen to the right Christians, but it depends on what side of the debate that you're on here.
Yeah.
I think that the hypocrisy of the megafolks or the Christian right comes from the folks that I saw on that parade, because a lot of them, can't. You feel like you can't enter a religious argument, or you can't argue with clergy unless you are a person of faith here. I think what we saw on Saturday, which was just absolutely beautiful, is that those of us that were clergy out there, we recognize that these people hurt on many reasons, some because of the church, some because of what Trump is doing. And I even had a conversation with a news person and says that what's going on in D.C., it's not unfamiliar about what happened in 1925 when you saw the Ku Klux Klan march down, and 30,000 Klans, marching in a parade similar to what we saw on Saturday, again, to marshal in white supremacy. But what I got to say this, because Boston is very white and the parade is very white, but you got a parade of white folks out there on Saturday against white supremacy, because they're about a much more diverse United States.
And this is really the point, that the parishioners or the non-parishioners, and more specifically non-clergy, have to speak up to these white evangelicals and these white racists and the these folks that you're talking about. It's not necessarily the battle for other clergy. I think the battle is for the folks who are sitting in those pews, and the folks who who have a different opinion and won't sit in those pews. The everyday people got to speak up, and that's what's happening. That's what happened on Saturday.
What we can do, that's important, is that tell people when we say we the people, we're talking about voting. So I was taking the red line, and thank God the green line didn't break on the way to Copley Square, because there would have been a whole bunch of mad protest. That would have been a real protest for sure. But thank God,
uniting people of all political positions.
Absolutely,
by the way, yes.
But the train stopped at Copley Square where we had to get off. But the thing was this here. It's like I was talking to a disgruntled person, young brother actually, who said he didn't vote. But by the time we got off of Copley Square, okay, that brother promised me he would vote, or at least he just wanted me to shut up. One or the other.
Talking to the Revs, Irene, Monroe, and Emmett Price III.
Okay, but the last thing about this though is can't there be more from the pulpits? I really think that there's.
Who's listening? See, we're talking to the already converted, one way or the other. Either if you're in the church, that's not the person I need to be talking to. I need to be talking to all those folks along the parade line to hear, to understand.
I guess, but there's tens of thousands of people in these mega churches. Everybody's got their cross on.
You're not going to convert those.
They're not doing.
Marjorie,
yeah,
Marjorie, there's a prayer. It's called the AA prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, change the things I can't, and the wisdom to know that you can't change these people.
Well, let me give you another example. Even if you can't there in Emmett, it seems to me the Catholic leaders in this country, who I would argue on a whole host of critical issues are anti-majoritarian, the one place where they've been pretty responsible is on issues of immigration. Yeah. And it seems to me that is a situation where having leaders in your church.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, every mass I've gone to, we have.
They're really talking about it?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it is important there, right? I mean, Emmett?
I mean, absolutely, it's important. But I think the challenge that we have, part of the reason where we're in the predicament that we're in, is that the politicization of the pulpit.
That's right.
And people actually want to see a pulpit that does not have to take a side, or if it does have to take a side, what is the side of Jesus?
That's right.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. If you're in a Christian church, you're supposedly following Jesus. I don't think that Jesus would be in favor of ICE immigration tactics the way they're happening. So it seems to me ridiculous that pastors wouldn't be talking more about that.
But it's not a single issue here. It's intersectional in this way. See, you can't talk about immigrants and not understand that some of the immigrants are LGBTQ. So, all of that kind of, so the point is the church becomes a bastion of contradiction because it makes an assumption that it's a single identity that you're talking about. You see, so it just doesn't work. And Emmett made it just as poignant in this, the politicization of the pulpit. We're trying to make this distinction between church and faith. Our job is to pastor. And I think we can do that without making it a political or bully.
But if it turns out so many people who do have the pulpit are not going to depoliticize what they're saying, and they're taking irresponsible positions, you either counter it or you're silent. Why are you shaking your head?
Because I think, again, you're looking at a model of a 1960 model that in many ways didn't politicize, but it excluded so many people. I think what we got to understand that there's a new way to do this, where the church can be, again, like I said, what we were ordained to be, which is pastors and not politicians.
Okay, I just want to tell you, because I thought it was so great, that in a Catholic church where there's a lot of LGBT groups in Catholic parishes, you may know about that. Certainly there is one in mine. And we had a person with a huge transgender and proud T-shirt giving out communion yesterday up at St. Ignatius at Boston College. And I think that's what I'm talking about. You can say we're not, the Rome isn't in favor of gay marriage, something like that. You can do totally different things in the parish level, and that's what I'm talking about. Because I was just going to say, some people that are there are not with the program. Some people are showing up at Mass, and they're conservative Catholics, and they need to hear about Catholic social teaching and Christian social teaching. That's
Emmett, go ahead.
What I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, the only thing that I would add here is that there are certain Catholics who would, on that last Sunday, make that the last Sunday in that parish.
That's right.
But they'll go down the street to the conservative parish and go join that parish. I mean, it's the same thing, because let's not forget that the Ku Klux Klan, who Irene was talking about marching 30,000 strong, were Christians.
That's right.
Let's not forget that, a lot of the white supremacists. So, first of all, the people who ascribe to that cultural belief, notice I said culture, not religious belief. People who subscribe to that cultural belief are not going to listen to a thing that Irene and I say anyway.
That's right.
So why would we spend our time and energy
you guys,
they might listen to you?
Didn't King talk about that, though, in his letter from the Birmingham jail, talking about how we need... I just want to finish this point, Irene. He talked about how the nice people that, are being on the sidelines need to get into the fray. I think that's what he was talking about, wasn't he?
He got assassinated.
No, he won't.
Well, he did, but not for a while. Thank God.
The thing about it is that this cannot be a church battle.
Yeah,
it has to be a battle of the populace, because what we're really dealing with is the nation, not the national church. We're fighting for the nation, and we're fighting for democracy. And if we locate the battlefield only in the church, then we're missing the great war. We're missing it. We're missing it, because there's so many people in this nation who are not Christians, who are not believers, and who are not practitioners of any faith or whatnot. They have to have a role in this. They have to be able to participate in this, and their voice has to matter, not just the Christian voice.
Yeah. But and you got to understand this, and it's wonderful. I'm delighted to hear that your Catholic Church, allowed a trans person to offer communion, because that is one of the struggles that LGBTQ Catholics are having. But you got to understand this, Marjorie.
What?
An exception does not negate the overall rule here, okay? And so when you got someone like now Pope Leo or Pope Bob, whatever name he's going by.
Leo.
Leo. So, again, he has a very strong bureaucratic fist around maintaining where LGBT should be in the church, which is outside the door. So I think, again, you because you have a good heart doesn't mean that the church down the block does. I think that what we can do as pastors is pastors those we can, and with the hope, like we did with the civil rights movement, it changed the moral conscience of America to see the struggle. And no better day than what Saturday was.
Okay, speaking of Pope Leo, here's a clip of Pope Leo delivering his first remarks in the United States, even though he wasn't in the United States. It's a video message to a U.S. audience. Do you know where it was, you two? Do you know where they played the video, you guys?
Was it in Chicago?
At the home stadium of his favorite baseball team. There was a mass at White Sox Stadium And it was broadcast, I guess, throughout Chicago. Here's a little bit of what the White Sox fan, who happens to be Pope, had to say.
We all live with many questions in our hearts. St. Augustine speaks so often of our restless hearts and says, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O God. That restlessness is not a bad thing, and we shouldn't look for ways to put out the fire, to eliminate or even numb ourselves to the tensions that we feel, the difficulties that we experience. We should rather get in touch with our own hearts and recognize that God can work in our lives, and through us, reach out to other people.
Okay, maybe he shouldn't lead the rallies. Okay, let's get no, it's fine. It's a fine thing there. So getting back to what you said a minute ago, because we've talked about this the day that we spoke to you guys almost immediately after Leo became the Pope. We were all surprised. When you were talking about the LGBTQ stuff, am I not wrong? I haven't looked this up recently. His comments were like a decade ago, right? And we've heard nothing from him since. Is that, I'm right about that, Irene, aren't I?
No, you're not, because he has made it very clear that there's been a number who said, well, yeah, it has been a year ago. So he came back to make it very, very clear, because he says that he's less progressive, believe it or not, than Pope Francis. He voiced his concern about media and culture promoting these beliefs around same-sex marriage and
recently he's done this.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, I
didn't see that. Where was that? Yeah. Where did you hear that or read it?
If you read the recent Time, there's a piece in Time magazine, because I purposely was trying to find what has he recently said. Yeah. But I need to say this here. I just want to say this, because we heard from Pope Francis, who am I to judge? That's the pastor in them. Okay, the church bureaucrat, that's their restlessness. Their heart is, I don't even know if their heart is, they're saying one thing that a pastor says, and they're saying another thing with a church bureaucrat. I like to believe that, yes, if he could open the doors of the church to LGBTQ people, and if he could ordain women, perhaps he would. But the church is not going to allow that. But see, that's where I think he becomes a titular head, because why be there if you're not going to affect change?
Hello? I'm looking this up. Why don't you keep talking for a second?
Okay. Yeah, well, we're just going to have, I think there is change. I think we have to agree to disagree about that. Because there's so many LGBTQ groups in all these parishes, that I think it is changing. It's not changing as fast, but I think it is. I think it is changing.
But we've always been in the church, Marjorie. Just know that it's not that all these. It's not like we just came in the church. I always tell people, gay people love Jesus just as much as straight people. Right. We always been there,
right? But it's not just obviously the Catholics. It's Islam. It's conservative Judaism. It's Hasidic Judaism. I mean, it's the Protestants. It's not all. It's what I mean. We're a lot of people in that same boat. And because the church is worldwide, the big problem for the church is other countries, the other continents where things are very much anti-gay, and that's part of the problem.
That's, by the way, part of what he talks about in Time magazine. He talks about cultural realities and differences in parts of Africa, for example, as opposed to parts of Western democracies. We'll check more into that before we see you guys again.
Okay. All right. So where are we going now?
We're talking about Islam for a second.
Oh, yes.
Are you with me, or what are we doing?
We are talking about Islam. Islam is increasing as Christianity is shrinking. So that's not good for the LGBTQ groups either.
No, it is actually, because you see, the point is then because we're allowed to come back to the church. I mean, if you're losing your straight parishioners, what happens? It's sort of like in any organization. When you lose the white folks, the black folks come in. I mean, it's all So this is a good move in many ways, because it'll be a much more inclusive church.
Islam? In terms of LGBTQ stuff?
No, I'm talking about the Christian church. In terms of
you
Islam,
think they have to be more inclusive if they're losing their numbers by dent of necessity, right? Is that what your point is?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's America where they're losing all the people. It's Africa and Asia where they're gaining the people.
South America.
Give it a moment. Give it a moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've been talking to the Reverends.
Wait. Do you guys have a podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did our Our last episode for season 8 was on the movie Sinners. The Ryan Coogler movie Sinners. And we talked about the influence and impact of not only black music and black culture, but some of the innuendo and the cultural coding that happens in the music. I mean, in the movie. I think it's one of our best episodes. I'm biased, of course, but I think it's a really good one.
Okay.
Terrific. We'll check it out. Okay. Rev's latest episode. Good to see you both. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks. We've been speaking with the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett Price. Reverend Irene Monroe is a syndicated religion columnist and the Boston voice of Detour's African-American Heritage Trail. Emmett G. Price III is founding pastor of Community of Love Christian Fellowship in Alston, the inaugural dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music. Together, they host the All Rev'd Up podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, coming up after this quick break, we open the lines to talk about dining al fresco with Rugrats. Should there be strict rules on the patio and at the brewery for kids' behavior? Or should they be able to roam free while their parents grab a beer? We'll ask you. You're listening to BPR on 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Rolfe. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, as tensions between the Trump administration and Canada linger, Governor Healey is meeting with a group of Canadian leaders. Red Sox fans are reacting to the team's trade of superstar Rafael Devers. And in a city filled with church steeples, Colorado Springs is also home to a congregation that uses psychedelics as sacrament. It's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu joins us tomorrow for Ask the Mayor at the library from 1 to 2. Ken Burns zooms in at 11:30 to talk about Bunker Hill Day and talk a little bit about his documentary series coming out in November, American Revolution. Ask the Governor, also at the library. It's Wednesday, June 25th from 11 to noon. But first, Bog Iron Brewing in Norton is cracking down on Rugrats, as Marjorie called them, at the tap room. They're implementing a new policy mandating parties with kids keep them seated at the table while in the tap room and the beer garden. With the season of alfresco dining upon us, we're checking with you about your threshold for small children on the patio, in the beer garden, frankly, any place you're going to have adult kinds of fun. How much free rein should their parents give them? Each brewery seems to have its own rules, where Bog Iron and some are restricting access, Trillium apparently in Canton, and others have a wide open lawn, adopt a more free-for-all atmosphere. The number is 877-301-8970. Which do you prefer? Should kids be allowed at all at adult kinds of things after a certain hour? It could be a restaurant, it could be a brewery or whatever. What is the place of children in, again, in adult kinds of festivities? We talked, what's the name of the bar where you're, am I allowed to say who worked at that?
Oh, the Dragon.
Yeah, didn't your kid work there for a while?
Yeah, she did. She did work there. She still
and what did
works
that guy
there
do?
sometimes.
It was a couple of months ago. What did he do?
Well, he was all over the globe because apparently he had these kids come in, and it was a Friday night. It was really busy. There was something going on that night that made it particularly busy. Mm-hmm. And this family had their kids standing, they kept going back into a separate room and standing on this table and causing a ruckus. And they asked them over and over again to please let the kid not let the kids stand at the table, and the parents were ignoring it. So finally, he just got frustrated. And even though it's a family joint, he asked the couple to leave, and he said, "Well, I'll pay for your food. Don't worry about it. I'll pay for your food." And they asked them to leave, and it became a big brouhaha.
And he promulgated a whole bunch of rules about how kids have
Dragon
to behave.
pizza.
I mean, It seems to me the issue is, some people say they should be seen but not heard in these things. Some of us believe they should be neither seen nor heard at these things. Is there any reason you can think of an adult at a restaurant, a brewery, whatever you want to pick, maybe even a movie? Isn't there a time after which these things should be adult only?
Well, he listed what owner Charlie Reed listed what he'd like for kids and parents in restaurants. And this is a great point. We do not welcome parents who do not want to share a dining experience with the children. And that's the point. You can't expect the wait staff to be babysitters for these kids.
Or other adults at other tables.
Adults.
You haven't answered any of my questions.
Okay.
Should there not be a time before which kids are allowed, not free reign, they can't run around like wild, but at the same time, after that hour, you just can't bring a kid to a public kind of thing. I mean, you can go to a park if you want. I'm talking about to like a restaurant
like after
or whatever.
7 or something like that.
Yeah, or like how about if they're 4, for example? Maybe that's
after 4. How about after 11 o'clock in the morning?
I mean, even if they're well behaved, don't you feel somewhat like constrained in how you behave and how you speak when there's a little kid sitting at the next table?
Well, if it's a really little kid, you don't have
Take
to drop
him to
any F-bombs or something like that.
Chuck E. Cheese exists anymore?
I don't know if Chuck E. Cheese exists anymore, but the point is, if they're well behaved kids and they're not running around, I don't care. But the problem is,
how do you do? But then they're there, and then it's a crapshoot, and then they're not well behaved. What do you have to report the parents to the maitre d' or the lead brewer?
I think some people do ask if they can move the table.
I'm telling you, time deadline, that is the key. It is arbitrary, but incredibly easy to enforce.
What's happening at these breweries, a lot of them are outside, they're open spaces, they get big tables. And I think sometimes the parents figure they can just go there and let the kids run around while they're sitting there having their beers.
Don't you think at the breweries, too, there should be a drink limit for the kids? I mean... I think part of the
leashes
the reason they're behaving so poorly.
They could be like one of those expander things, the leashes you have for the dog. So if the dog gets too far, bounces them back by the neck. You know what I'm saying?
Again, you're getting this. I really, by the way, I'm not doing this to be, what's the word? To provoke people, provocative.
Yeah.
I really believe, other than things that are kid places that are frequented by adults, I was kidding about 4 o'clock, 5:30, whatever it is the time you shouldn't be having kids in these kind of locales. And then you wouldn't get into these kind of tense situations.
Okay, here's someone who disagrees with us. She says, she's not saying her child misbehaved, but she said, the only reason I had a life when I was a single mom was because places like breweries allowed babies. I was the only one of my friends with a kid, so I would have been totally isolated if I couldn't have brought the kid with her. So let's presume that she brought her kid and the kid was behaving herself.
Well,
on the other hand,
you don't know that.
We don't know that. We don't know that. But it's a point. It's a point. And the second person says, Jim, children and double dippers should be banned.
Okay, I'm a double dipper.
So
by the way, the response to the first one when it says I couldn't go anywhere, the kid's eventually going to go to college. When the kid goes to college, you can go. Let's go to Jackie in a Car. You are first on BPR. We're talking about where and how it's appropriate to have children in adult locales. Hello there.
Good afternoon.
And to you, of course.
Maybe I'm just really old.
Yeah.
But I never took my kids to a bar, a brewery. And I wouldn't take my kids in a liquor store. I was like, oh my God, my mother would kill me.
You must be really old then. Go ahead. Yeah.
I know, Dad. Listen, I'm agreeing with Jim, so be nice.
Okay, I'm sorry. I take it back. Go ahead.
They don't belong in a brewery. They don't belong in a brewery. I'm sorry, you can't get a babysitter. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't want to go in a brewery with, 5-year-olds running around. I'm leaving.
Well, wait a second. Jackie, since your wisdom is extraordinary here, how about even a restaurant? Don't you think there's a time after which adults should be able to be with adults only?
Yes.
No, I'm talking to Jackie here.
Because you know what? Kids sundown like old people. 4 o'clock, Marjorie, you had 3 kids. You had 2 kids, Jim.
Yeah.
So the 4 o'clock hour, it's just that time of day. I don't know how else to say it. They need to take either go watch TV for half an hour, eat some supper, go play, and go to bed.
Jackie, you know how to live. Let me tell you that you are exactly right on every word you've said. That's Jackie in the Car. Thank you very much for your call. That was beautiful.
Here's a good text. It is unclear to me when parents stopped having shame over how their children behave. I have a 2-year-old, and at the first sign of bad behavior, we leave. There's no running around and terrorizing other people, even though she recognizes her child is a tiny terrorist. But she says, I don't need to unleash her tiny terrorism on other people. I'd be so embarrassed, and I'm embarrassed for others when I see it.
How are your kids when you're a pretty honest person? How were your kids when you take them out to public places when they were young?
I don't think I ever took them to a nice restaurant when they were young.
Well, see,
Yeah.
So that's where I am.
Well, because if I'm going to go out to a nice restaurant and pay a lot of money, I don't want to have to spend the whole night worrying about whether, my kids are going to be behaving and how, it's not fun. Yeah. It's not fun. But I get it.
Did you ever Velcro them to the wall when they were young?
I thought about it.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what you see a lot of the time now? Kids with iPads or phones.
But can I tell you something? I don't really mean to be a Scrooge-like individual because my kids were young, obviously, once or now in their young 30s. Doesn't it ruin the mood for you in a place, again, whether it's a bar, a brewery, a restaurant, whatever the hell it is? That's not where kids should be hanging out.
It's not as bad as the kid running up and down the aisle making a lot of noise and kicking your chair or something like that.
That's true.
Listen to this. Tilted Barn Brewery in Rhode Island has a no kids rule 7 to 9 on Fridays.
There you go.
Mark from Westwood.
It's a good start.
So there you go.
It's not enough. Eric in Worcester, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about children in adults kinds of places. Hello there.
Yeah, so I have 2 little ones, and I'll say, the parents definitely have to be involved. But, and I'm going to throw a big but into this, that I think at the same time, we tolerate so many other distractions and nuisances when we're out and about. You mentioned people having kids on their iPads. The number of people I hear on their phones having conversations.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Turning around, doing other things. Why is it that we decide children are not okay, but all these other artificial noises are? And it seems there's a bit of a double standard there. So I think that it's a balancing act. As someone with 2 kids, we do the same thing. If our kids start misbehaving or aren't behaving, we generally try to take off. We are definitely in the early bird special camp right now. So, we are eating at 5 o'clock and trying to get them home before they start crashing. But I think that, again, a little bit of grace with this goes a long way. There are parents out there who don't have resources or people available to babysit.
That's a very good point.
It's very expensive. It's very expensive. You're absolutely right. I think that's why parents take the kids out, because it costs $20 an hour
You're
for a
a thoughtful guy, Eric. That was an excellent call.
Listen
Thank
to this.
you.
If parents don't want to parent in public, they should get a sitter. I used to work security at Boston College sporting events, and the number of small children running around the hockey rink, the basketball or football stadium, unsupervised, and eventually lost at every event he worked was astounding.
Did your parents ever lose you? I was lost on the beach in Atlantic City when I was little. I never told you this. Yeah.
Was it intentional, do you think?
It was my father's. It probably was intentional. He probably picked up whatever woman he was looking to find. And he said, I brought something with me. I can't remember what it was exactly.
This
I remember how terrorized I was, but I was absolutely in
I think it's terrible. Kids get petrified when they're lost. Those racks in clothing stores, you turn the racks, they're round, they're circular
Kids
racks.
go right under those things.
Yeah, I lost my daughter once. And I panicked and started screaming, I've lost my kid, running up and down the aisles. And of course, there she was in the circular rack.
What do you say to the guy who called a minute ago who's really good? And it's saying there are other distractions that are equally horrible, like people, which is about as rude as it gets, speaking loudly on their phone in a place where other people are sitting at the next table, the next bar stool, or whatever. Why is that any different than the kid thing?
Well, I think it's the unpredictability of the kid racing around and running around. I mostly feel bad for the people that are serving the food. I mean, you have a little 3-year-old running up and down the aisles. It could be a very, very dangerous. Imagine how you feel if you dropped a whole plate of, big, huge tray on a little kid. You feel terrible.
Marjorie and I went to a work prep lunch one day, and people were speaking loud at the next table, and she was too nervous to go over and tell them to stop talking on their phone. I did.
Jim manned up and went over.
I did.
Yep. Then we had to call the police right after that.
We did, actually. We did, but that's
okay, let's go to Emily in North Reading.
Hello,
Hi,
Emily.
Hi, first time, long time.
Thank you.
So I was the one that texted about a single mom.
Yes.
Mom, the only reason I was able to go out.
Yes.
I'm no longer a single mom, but I really agree strongly with the gentleman that was on the phone before, and I think a lot of it comes down to seeing children as full humans that deserve dignity, and the idea of sequestering them to certain times or locations, like how are they supposed to learn how to be respectful members of society if they're not allowed in these spaces? And I think it can also be almost like a dangerous pathway into ableism of, like, what about other people that have certain conditions or disabilities that might make you feel uncomfortable because they're disruptive to you, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to participate in these other areas of society.
Can I tell you something, Emily? You and the prior caller have totally humiliated me, and you are so right in your analysis, as is he. That was terrific, and I'm glad you followed up your text.
But Emily, one thing though, I've always thought that it's really hard if a kid is like 2 years old, but if a kid is 5 or 6. They can usually handle
but you know what the solution to Emily's thing, where you teach the kid how to behave in social settings. Emily, would you agree with this? You do it early.
Absolutely.
That way it's a twofer.
My daughter, she's 9, and I bring her to everything with me. It's never been an issue because we said like, okay, like now is when we're quiet. And I would bring activities for her. Like she has ADHD, so I bring fidgets. Like there's ways to like preemptively handle these situations, but also at the same time, like I'm not expecting total strangers to provide free childcare for me. That's nonsense.
Can I tell you, you're a really good caller, and I bet you're a great mother. That was great, Emily. Thanks.
Who's the bloody sock pitcher, the Red Sox?
Oh, Kurt Schilling.
Kurt Schilling. We had his wife on our old radio station.
She got she had that. The stuff from the sun, right? She had
some kind of skin cancer or something.
Skin cancer.
But she was talking about her own children. I think one kid or maybe 2 kids has some kind of disability or something. She was talking about how they would not be able to, sit through the whole game, and that's a long game. Baseball games can go on forever. But it wasn't because they were rude children. It was because they had some kind of disability issue. And when people would be looking at her like, "You're a crummy mother. Why can't you control your kids?" Sometimes she turned around and told them, my kids are dealing with H, Y, or Z, and I thought that was pretty.
I saw Kurt Schilling and his wife and the whole family at the Natick Mall at the food court.
Really?
Yes, that was after she was on the show.
Oh.
I said hello to her. He didn't really want to say hello to me, and that was it.
Oh. Well, that's not a very good story, Jim.
Oh, there's a lot more to it.
Really?
No.
Were the kids behaving?
No, there's actually nothing more to it.
Oh, there's nothing more to it.
No.
Okay.
That was it, so I'm sorry I told that.
Well, you never know. The famous people you might meet at the Natick Collection, Jim.
Yeah.
You just never know.
It's not called the Collection anymore, I don't think.
Okay. It used to be the Collection. Dave from Pepperell, thank you for calling.
Gives us an opportunity to tell the story of the 40-year-old whose parents. Wait 1 second.
Marjorie,
Dave, 1 second. You got to hold 1 second. Okay. Only because you can't mention the Natick Collection without mentioning the Great Globe story from many years ago, where a 40-year-old young man could not get a date, so his parents bought him a condo that was above the Natick Collection, and if you take the elevator, it wasn't quite. You ended up in the woman's dressing room, but it was close. Is that close?
Well, there's also a bar there, and they thought you could meet a woman at the bar.
I'm really sorry, Dave.
That's okay. Dave, go ahead.
Hi, Dave. Welcome.
That's all right. Well, Marjorie poured Jim a 20-ouncer. I'm going to add to his walk of humiliation here.
Okay.
I was for Father's Day. I was last night at the Wachusett Brewery, and it wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty. And first, there was a family of, I don't know. I think I ran out of counting four kids, but they're all well behaved and all sort of blended in. And then there was a family with just a baby. And the baby was the hit of the night.
Really?
I mean, they, mom and dad both lifted up the baby, kissed his face, and things like that.
Oh.
And, other people were kind of looking on and almost like wishing they were there.
Well, there you go. Well, the well-behaved thing, right? That's the key issue, Dave, right?
There's so much better people than I am, the callers. Dave, that was another good one.
And
go ahead.
And if you want to get rid of kids, you've got to get rid of the parents. Parents are the ones that are not helping to keep things in order.
Well, I'm
okay with that too.
That is the problem, that parents are kind of don't. And thank you for the call, Dave. That was a good one.
Thank you.
And Mel from Littleton presents that side of the story. He said, I'm all about fun with the family, but little kids running around breweries has hit a tipping point. My husband almost stepped on a toddler playing with a ball on the floor of the Mighty Squirrel in Waltham a couple of years ago.
Oh.
And Mel also wondered who the designated driver is for the group of parents that were there.
You ever stepped on a toddler?
No, I've not stepped on a toddler.
Okay.
Maybe one of my own.
If any of you have stepped on a toddler, if you give us a buzz at 877-301-8970, let us know how that went.
A lot of people are saying that when they go out to eat and they're seated at a table next to a bunch of kids, they ask to be seated someplace else.
You don't do that? Oh, you're too nice to ask for that. You don't ever ask for that?
You know me. I never go anywhere.
I know, but if you were to go somewhere and there were kids sitting at the next table, would you ask for another table? No.
Well, if I am going to go out, I do want to go out to a restaurant, a nice restaurant. And if you're going to go out to a nice restaurant and spend a lot of money, then you want to be adult kind of situation.
By the way, despite the fact 3 callers in a row have relatively humiliated me, it doesn't undercut my notion that fine, bring the kid, but bring the kid to a certain hour, after which you take the kid home. Am I not right about that?
you're absolutely right
She's not
about that,
listening to
Jim.
me, I can tell.
Well, because somebody just texted and said, it's rained the last 14 Saturdays in a row. We got to take our kids somewhere. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Caroline from Jamaica Plain.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. Of
course.
So 2 quick points.
Yeah.
Number one, the gentleman that called about people talking on cell phones.
Yeah.
Well, pretty much they're adults. But the difference between kids screaming, yelling, jumping, rolling around is that they're moving. And many of them are screaming at the top of their lungs. And I just in the past day, I saw a couple of kids trying to push through a door. And just completely out of control. And mom grabbed the kid almost by the neck, the scruff of the neck.
Scruff.
You know, and with the eyes up into heaven. But you never hear, I have one more story.
Please.
I just want to finish this.
No, these are good so far.
You never
Go ahead.
hear a mom unless it's too much. And it's never a dad. By the way, it's never a dad. It's always a mom. So ponder that. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
But in addition to that, you know, they're just not saying to the kid at any point, stop, or we'll leave. Or giving them that glare that, you know, you just know what that means. A couple of years ago, I was at a brewery, I'll be quick, and it's a big flat floor brewery. I was sitting in the front looking at a band, and there was maybe 10 or 12 feet between the audience and the band. And kids who were too old to do this were running around in circles screaming. Circles screaming like kids would do outside in a yard or at camp or something like that.
Yeah.
And they'd run out the door and they'd run back. And they're jumping over my feet. They ended up jumping over my feet.
I love this woman.
I stuck my legs out. I did the adult thing. And I
Caroline,
stuck
you were
my
the
legs
best.
out.
Oh, my God.
How'd that go?
No. And I gave them the glare like, I'm serious. You jump, I'm going to trip you. And that was the end of that.
That was the end of
You
that.
don't mess
Good
with
for
Caroline.
You. I love that.
Caroline, that was pretty excellent. Thank you very much for your call. We appreciate that.
Okay, this is from Harmony in Providence. I was a server in Boston for years at Legal Seafoods and loathed tables with kids. I wasn't a mother then, but I am now. Today, as a mother, I don't understand why parents even want to take their kids to a restaurant or brewery because it's so stressful. Pack a picnic, go to a park, put your alcohol in your Stanley bottle like an adult.
Thank you for holding
and drink
that
at the
up.
park.
That was excellent.
I mean, I think that's a good point. Somebody else says, oh my God, who's bringing their kids to a brewery? What's next? Kids at strip clubs? Nightclubs? This is ridiculous.
Did you know you could bring them to a brewery? I didn't even know you could bring them to a brewery.
Well, I think some places have rules. Some people have texted us about different breweries that have rules about when you can bring kids and when you can't bring kids. And this consensus seems to be maybe during the day it's okay, but after like 5 o'clock at night, forget about it.
What do you think of Caroline's strategy of tripping the children? I would argue that would probably inhibit the next child, would you not say?
Yeah, because you trip
minor damage to one, but that probably addresses the issue.
I used to do it to my sister all the time.
Do you ever intervene with the parent when the kid is misbehaving?
No. Have you?
Well, you know, we've had this discussion, you probably don't remember it, about kids misbehaving. I once, and I regret this, and I hesitated. I once spoke to a mother who was treating, this isn't just a kid who was being loud, a kid who was being treated very poorly.
Oh, that's bad.
And I did,
that's
but then
bad.
I did. And then she treated the kid even worse because she wanted to get, you know what I mean? She couldn't get back at me because I'm rather large. And so she made it worse. So it's a real conundrum,
yeah,
you know?
But I think sometimes in those situations, it's good to let the child know that another adult thinks what their parent is doing is bad.
That's an excellent point,
and that's
by the way. That's a
why
really
when
good
I have
point.
done it, that's
Here's
why
an
I've done
anonymous texter. I think you should read this one because it really is a brilliant strategy by this person.
I bring my kid everywhere, and they watch Topo Gigio on my phone. Never had a problem. Okay, Jim does a better Topo Gigio than Topo Gigio.
You know,
that Topo Gigio sounds like a scary, sinister person. Do your Topo Gigio.
I spoke to a lot of people about it this weekend.
Yeah.
When you say better, it's my imitation is inaccurate.
That's right. I don't want to hear that creepy Topo Gigio. I want to hear the Jim Topo Gigio.
What I do
Come on, give us a Topo Gigio.
Eddie.
Okay.
I love you, Eddie.
Okay. Isn't that better?
But that's not that's not what he sounded like.
Well,
Wasn't who he was.
He's been dead for years.
Who?
Topo Gigio.
Yes. Okay.
Listen,
thank you. No, please stop with that. Okay.
Okay. This person was a manager at TJ's.
Yeah.
A lady once allowed her kid
TJ's?
to. It's a restaurant. Haven't you heard of TJ's?
No.
Well, I think I've heard
well,
of
keep
it.
going. I'm sorry.
It's on TJ Maxx.
No,
it's a restaurant.
okay, fine. What?
But she said a lady once allowed her child to push the grocery cart while she was texting on her phone. Maybe it is TJ Maxx.
And she pushed it right in the back of the heels.
The child was running into another customer, and she reached in and stopped.
Trader Joe's.
Trader
People call it
okay,
TJ's.
Trader Joe's.
That's humiliating.
I thought it was TJ Maxx.
Okay,
Shows
fine.
what I know, even though I spent a lot of time at Trader Joe's.
Can I ask you one more question before we get back to the calls?
Great flowers.
Caroline, who the tripper, as we call her, she talked about grabbing children by the scruff of their neck. It's an expression I've heard my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the scruff of one's neck? Do you know?
I think it's right where your hairline
Turn
meets.
around. Can you turn around?
I think it's where your hairline.
But what do you grab on? What do you grab onto?
The scruff.
Oh, the scruff. Oh. I misunderstood. I didn't think of that. So, I see. Okay, scruff.
Now, what is the scruff? I have no idea.
It's the thing you grab onto. You grab the scruff of the thing. Sarah in Malden.
Hi.
Hello there, Sarah.
Hi there. Long time, first time.
Thank you.
And actually, I've never called before, but this made me so mad that I had to call.
Great.
Oh, good. We're ready.
I have two kids. They're 5 and 8. They've basically grown up in breweries. We take them all sorts of places.
Grown up in breweries.
Similar to previous callers, I just question how they're supposed to learn how to behave in these situations if they're never exposed to it. We take them all sorts of places, and there's also, I would add, a lot of breweries that have really great setups for kids. So there's places that have big beer gardens and outside space that they can run around, and it really isn't bothering anybody. And we monitor them really carefully. We definitely take them out if there's an issue. Yeah. And to Caroline the tripper, I would also add that my husband participates fully in making sure that they're monitored. Like, there's no situation in which I'm the only person doing that. He is very, very involved in that as well. We often go as a group with other families, so there's lots of eyes on kids, and it's a great place for us as a family.
Well, Sarah,
and I'd be really sad if we couldn't do that.
Don't go away, Sarah.
Here's the deal. You are not an American. This is an ugly American issue, wouldn't you say? I mean, these are the ugly Americans. We have all these texts from people that are in Paris and that are in Great Britain, and they talk about how young children go out to restaurants and they're welcome. You have better manners.
Well,
I think that's it.
But she is in America. Hey,
I mean,
Sarah.
A lot of our friends, I am an American citizen. I'm not originally from America, but we have a lot of American friends who are the same as us.
Sarah, but wait a second.
Most of our best friends in breweries.
So you made your first call because you were so aggravated with me, and I appreciate that. But it's fine. But my question is, shouldn't there be a time limit? You bring your kids so you can teach them how to behave in public, and at a certain time, they go home with you. Isn't that like a good compromise?
Well, I think that there's a lot of parents who do that intuitively. Like, there's a lot of places that first of all, there's a lot of places we wouldn't take our kids. And there's also a lot of places that we go at off hours. Our local brewery in Malden is Idle Hands, and we go there often at the kind of 5:30 on a Wednesday time. And there's not very many people there. It's actually, I hope we're giving them some business at a time that they would otherwise be quite quiet. And if it starts to fill up, we go home.
How come we don't think through things like these callers do? Sarah,
I think Sarah gave a great call. And I assume the places you don't take your kids is to very expensive high-end restaurants.
Yeah, like where? Quickly.
Right.
Yeah,
and I also would add, when you were talking about the babysitter, if you can find a babysitter for $20 an hour, I'd love to know who they are.
Boy, you
oh my God!
Every base,
is it going up
woman.
now? How much? What's the going rate, Sarah?
We gotta go.
$30.
There are some people who charge $30. Yeah,
that's outrageous.
Sarah, thanks. Call us again, will you? Even when you're not angry at me.
I think they should be tarred and feathered.
Okay, so what's your position on kids? You don't want them anywhere, correct?
Well,
tell the truth.
Yeah, well.
You're worried you're going to alienate your audience? Is that why you're not answering honestly? You don't want them anywhere.
I'm going to lose my 7-year-old audience. Exactly. I want to hold on to them. I want to hold on to them until at least they're 10.
Yeah.
So what's your position?
Well, I think something broke, I feel like. Because when I was a kid, we were taught by our parents you behaved a certain way. Yeah. So now it's we who are having the kids, and yet our kids are not doing this. I don't understand
what
broke.
The rule was be seen, not heard. Just sit there and shut up.
Of course, I look at all the kids who are running around. They're having a blast. All the kids who are behaving look like they've had 14 shots of Benadryl and are sullen and miserable.
That is a really
especially
good
on the
point.
airplanes.
Yeah.
You just guzzle down the Benadryl and then passed out the poor little
Okay,
thing.
it's time to say, what are you doing, Jared?
We are going to be talking about Frederick Douglass, the opera, which is about to be performed here.
He's doing a great job, by the way, Frederick Douglass. You know that?
According to the president, yes.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, well, now he's the star of an opera. So we'll have a preview and a performance.
Nothing he can't do.
Nothing he can't do,
Go
even
ahead.
now. Jacob's Pillow is about to open its 93rd season, the
that is
oldest
incredible.
dance festival in the
Summer in
country.
Western Mass is
They're talking about that later today at 8 p.m.
Oh, good.
After your show, though.
Go ahead. Go
You'll
ahead.
beat them
Next.
to it.
And then the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. That's tomorrow, but everything is being staged in Gloucester this coming weekend. So we'll talk about that because they couldn't have all the people descend on Charlestown. Too many people.
All right. That sounds pretty interesting, actually.
Okay.
Jared's got several
Nice to see
people
you.
hidden in his closet. I understand. They put right in the closet. Those little rugrats.
Oh yeah.
Is that what you do?
I don't think
No
you
one can
say
blame
that in
you.
jest, you know what I mean? You can trip him like the caller did, Caroline, but that's the extent of it. Goodbye, Jared. We'll be listening to your show 2.5 minutes
Thank you,
away.
Jared. Keep up with us 24/7 wherever our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Jared is too nice for anybody in the closet, Jim.
He's
You
too
know
nice.
that.
Well, nobody should be for them.
No one should do that.
She meant
obviously.
that as a bad joke.
Oh, of course.
Bad joke.
A busy show tomorrow at the BPL. PBS filmmaker, a documentary, and Ken Burns zooms into the show to talk about the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, plus his thoughts on the protest movement in America today and the battle over public media. He's also going to talk about his new documentaries coming up this fall about the American Revolution. A local sustainable farming panel with Ken Rappaport of Azaluna Farms and Christopher president of Green City Growers. Also, NBC Sports Boston attorney Casey, GBH president and CEO Susan Goldberg on the future of federal funding and rescission for PBS and NPR. We hope it doesn't happen. The mayor's going to be with us again, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. I want to thank our crew. Zoe
1 to
Matthews.
2, the mayor.
Yep. Zoe Matthews, Aidan Coleman, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker. Our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Additional support from Nia Harmon. Special thanks to BPL staff, Maddie Gar, Patrick Lowley, Juan Jose Cadena, our host of the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street, the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned to The Culture Show with Jared Bowen, starting immediately after us on 89.7 GBH. I'm Marjorie Egan.
Someone has me by the scruff of the neck, so I have to go. See you. Bye.
Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, committed to helping customers lower their environmental impact, offering all-electric heat pump systems from Mitsubishi Electric. RevisionEnergy.com. Looking for a little grit to start your week? Then get ready for a Monday night crime spree. Catch Midsummer Murders at 8, Daglish at 9, and Undercover at 10. Tonight on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.